Inside at last.
A
while back, I was contacted by an old associate, Keeper Zermello. He had a job for me. He wanted me to steal a magical gem known as the Olive Stone, which is currently on display in the Omega Gallery atop Hilbert's Highrise hotel. I'm not usually eager to run errands for the Keepers, so I just said I'd take it under advisement. Keepers rarely offer to pay, and the Omega Gallery is well known for its state-of-the-art security system. In short, it didn't seem worth the risk. But word on the street is that the hotel's alarm system is currently down, and as they're sure to get it fixed soon, I don't want to miss my window. This might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and after all, it can't hurt to have a keeper who owes you a favor. While I'm there, I should be able to pinch more than just the Olive Stone and some assorted trinkets. The Omega Gallery also hosts additional treasures, the builder's original hammer and chisel, and a rare collection of gems known as the Platonic Crystals. In the right hands, they could fetch quite the price. The alarm system is down, but tonight's heist will still prove quite the challenge. The gallery's most precious artifacts are no doubt protected most securely. Not to mention, the hotel has shuttered its usual operations, so posing as a guest is out of the question. But since when do I need a warm welcome to pull off a job? No point in waiting. It's time to begin.
Welcome, fellow Taffers, to Inside at Last, the one and only thief-dedicated podcast. My name is Alex, and today I am joined by Jake and Seth. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Good. We have to stop doing those questions because I always feel the urge to answer it, and then it destroys my flow. So we are always fine, you know. And yeah, finally, after, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 episodes, we finally have an amazing guest again. And it's the first time I think it will be a very interesting discussion. So thanks for being here and joining us, Trefoilknot, or Matt, as we will call you in the during the episode. Hi, welcome, and yeah, great that you're here.
Thank you very much. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here today.
Yes, it's an honor for us. So today's focus will be the heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel. Your mission from 2019, if I'm correct.
2020.
No, 2020 was. It was the pandemic year, right? But we will also have a little look into some of your other works, namely Dielya's the Sunken Temple of Dielya, was it? And where is it?
Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb.
Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb. Yeah, so long, so many names with such a long title.
Did you forget the Forgotten Tomb? No, I'm just kidding.
That one is not mine. Plenty of people have confused that one with mine.
Not me. No, but it will be a huge discussion about so many scientific stuff. But first of all, since you are a new guest, please tell us a bit about you, what you do, where you are, who you are, and then later, please tell us, how did you stumble upon Thief and why do you love it?
All right, sure. So my name is Matt. I'm 32 years old. I live on the East Coast of the United States. I'm a professor at an Ivy League business school, so I'm not a math professor, as I think a lot of people have mistakenly assumed. But I work at a business school. I teach mostly undergraduate students, a few graduate student courses. And beyond Thief, my favorite hobbies are playing table tennis, playing Ultimate Frisbee, and playing trumpet. I also have a wife, Erica, she's an attorney, and a daughter who is 15 months named Isabel. So that's a little about me. How I got into Thief. So I'm 32 now, so I would have been like 9 years old when Thief came out. I didn't play it immediately upon release, but I must have played it within a month because it was still 1999. I had already been playing video games for many, many years. My dad loved video games. I grew up playing them as early as probably 3 years old, learning how to use a keyboard and a mouse to play, some old black and white games like Scarab of Ra and Crystal Quest. But we had only had a Macintosh computer. And there were all these games that I really wanted to play, but couldn't play because they weren't supported on Mac. And so finally, when I was in 4th grade, my dad got us a Windows computer for home. And so the first thing I did is I was like, all right, well, I gotta, this was way before Google, but I guess it would have been like Alta Vista or Yahoo or something like that. I was like, gotta Google, what are the best video games to get right now that we finally have a Windows computer. And one of the first ones that popped up was this game Thief. And I just remember being really intrigued. There were, some pictures of it. I think it was probably the same pictures as you'd find on the box with like the Cray Beast guy and like the weird sort of twisty hallway from the sword and the fireballs in the Lost City. I remember thinking like, oh man, that looks super cool. Like I really want to play this game. But it was rated M for mature. So it was a little bit of a tough sell getting my parents to buy it. But they agreed like, okay, yeah, we can play. Your older brother, he'll play with you. And so that was sort of how that got started. And I remember playing Bafford's Manor was perfectly fine. Like I was absolutely enraptured by the environment. I loved the sneaking. I loved sort of the funny conversations you would hear, the bear pits, and then, Benny being stupid and not understanding that you want to catch people before they break in. And so I was just like really digging it. Then I got to Crag's Cleft, stepped on a zombie, freaked out, couldn't sleep for probably 2 or 3 nights, and like didn't play again for a couple weeks. But then when I finally got back into it, just fell in love with the game all over again. And I mean, like, yeah, I've been playing it ever since.
So you've been a very brave 9-year-old. Yeah. We so often had this talk, so I could totally feel your pain with Craig's Cleft. But thank you first for this very detailed explanation of your person and your life and how you stumbled upon Thief. That was, I think, the most detailed story. Thanks for that. So back in the days, playing on Mac was a huge pain, I would say, because nowadays it's, I think, easier to play. I think Steam supports it a lot. But back in the days, I know that Mac was not a good platform for gaming.
Yeah, it really was not. I mean, if you wanted to play first-person shooter type games, it was absolutely terrible. There was nothing. If you wanted to play strategy games, if you wanted to play sort of bird's eye view, old school role-playing games, Mac was not too bad. So that's what I spent a lot of my time playing when I was younger. Played a lot of Prince of Destruction, which was this old school RPG game, Realms, which was sort of like a computerized version of Dungeons and Dragons. Played some RTS games like Warcraft and Warcraft 2.
They
but
work.
First-person shooters, there was nothing. There was Pathways into Darkness.
I remember.
Game.
I remember that there is a game called Safecracker, which was for Macintosh. And I played a demo of this somewhere. I don't know where, but I would love to play this game today, but you can run it on Windows, which is sad. But this was really amazing with really cool safe cracking puzzles. And speaking of puzzles, so you are basically you create puzzle missions. Is that correct? The term?
Yeah, that's certainly how I would describe it.
So what is the appeal to you? Why is this, so at least for creating missions, why is this your preferred type of missions that you create? So what gets you there? What is your inspiration or why do you like it? You know what I mean?
I mean, so puzzles have been a big part of my life since very early on. Like I've always loved puzzles, brain teasers, riddles, things like that. I mean, some of my earliest childhood memories are actually my mom would craft these. I mean, they were basically puzzle missions within the house. We would play where, so when I was like 4 or 5 years old, she would draw maps of the house with little X's where there might be like Oreos hidden and things like that. Sometimes there would be like these rhyming poems that would sort of be giving you hints about where you had to go in the house to find the next clue. I mean, like one of my most vivid recollections, I think I was probably 5 years old, and my mom had made she had made like fake papyruses by taking normal paper and then browning it over the burner on the stovetop to make it look, sort of old and ancient. And then there was a riddle on it that was like, take 16 steps, then left again, you'll find the next clue inside the hen. And I, like, immediately as a 5-year-old, I was like, oh, I know, there's 16 stairs, I have to run up the stairs, and then I have to go around the corner, and then we have that little metal hen, and just being, like, so excited and feeling so clever when I had, like, solved the puzzle. So I've always loved puzzles.
For me, as a pedagogue, I really have to clap your mom, because she very early activated your brain and your interest in stuff like that. And I would assume that, what you're doing today, things like that affect children very early. And I think they are very important for the later life. And yeah, really, that's really cool, and I like it that your mom took the time for that. I like parents with engagement with their children. That's
absolutely.
really cool.
She lived a little bit of thief.
Well.
Yeah, you had those maps already, that's children love that. But now in context of Thief, that's actually pretty cool. So I could imagine that when you saw the maps in Thief, that you got a good feeling with them.
Just like home.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Jake?
Oh, I said just like home. The maps are just like home.
Yeah. Actually, they were his home, so.
It's funny. So she plays Thief, just about as much as I do. My brother plays a bit. My dad also plays a bit. But one of our sort of silly family traditions now that we like to do, my mom and dad will create, we call them home family thief missions, which is, it's sort of like a fan mission, except rather than doing it in Dromed, because my mom doesn't, she likes to play Thief. I tried to show her Dromed, and she was like, nope, not getting into that.
Do your parents still adopt children?
I don't know. I could ask them.
Even if they're 34?
Like, have you ever done an escape room?
Yeah.
So it's a lot like that, where, they'll take, various different objects within the house and, try to craft a story around them. And there's, one object that is what you're trying to steal. And there's not a whole lot of the stealth and things like that involved, because that's, just really difficult, I think, to do in the context of a real life game. I'm not going to bonk anybody on the head, and I can't actually sneak past, within the confines of the house. Has a lot of, the readables and the personalities and like the notes from one guard to another. A lot of puzzles, a lot of riddles.
I adore your family already. That must be so much fun. It sounds really great and interesting.
Absolutely. And some of the puzzles that I put into my fan missions actually are inspired by ones that my parents put into some of these home family thief missions.
And so now tell me, when your mom is in a room and you enter, is she saying like, "Is that you, Kevil?"
Rats. Always rats.
And your dad is drunk in the cellar, in the basement, guarding the wine. No, I'm kidding. But yes, that sounds really cool. Wow.
So what is it about puzzles? So why do I make puzzle missions? So I think number one, it's that I love them. I think number two, it's I think what I'm comparatively good at. I love Skacky's missions too. But I can't make a city like he can. So I'm not gonna, I could spend months and months and years trying to emulate that style. But it's just never going to be as great as what he could do. Whereas I feel like with puzzles, I can have an idea that I can execute that maybe a lot of people won't like it because they don't necessarily like puzzles. But for people who do like puzzles, I can hopefully really strike a chord with them.
I have to say, as a person who plays a lot of Thief fan missions, I'm not a big puzzle mission player, and I wouldn't call myself a person who likes puzzle missions. But I was very, very sold when I played a couple of yours. Like, they made me feel like a genius. So, in a way, I think your missions have a nice way of teaching people who don't necessarily consider themselves puzzle mission players to like puzzles.
Well, thank you. That's really high praise. And I think that feeling like a genius afterwards, like that's exactly the goal. Because when I'm designing a puzzle mission, when I'm designing a puzzle, really, like, that's sort of the end goal, is to make something that will be solvable, and when they solve it, they feel really clever to have solved it. I don't know that I always get the right balance there, because it's tricky to balance, like, well, it can't be too obvious because then it's boring, and it can't be too obscure that nobody's able to get it. So trying to strike that balance where it can be solved, but when you solve it, you feel really proud. Like, hey, I figured that out. That's really cool. I must be a genius. Like, that's exactly what I'm going for. So I'm glad that, at least for you, I was able to hit that right balance.
I have to say that I'm always very impressed, because playing a puzzle, of course, is one thing, but creating something is, first you have to have the idea, then you have to find the solution on your own first, so it's not presented. You have to think of the start and the end of the whole thing and how to get there. And then, as you said, like, finding the right balance, I think you can always hit or miss people, no matter how good you balance it in theory, because, there could be that one guy who's really clever, but he doesn't find that one clue, and it could be, it doesn't have to be hidden really bad or something. It's just like he's missing it, and so the whole thing is maybe ruined, But in general, I think people like yours and Nick, for example, as well, I think you are really good at finding the right balance in most cases, I would say, and I'm really impressed by that. So, is there, like, how do you know that this is a good balance, or how do you get the feeling for it? Like, because I could not imagine.
So I think if I had, like, the perfect, just sort of a canned procedure for getting the right balance, I'd make $1 gazillion in the gaming industry, because everybody is trying to get that. I think the solution that industry has come up with is spend hundreds to thousands of hours on player testing. Right? You have alpha testing, you do a few rounds of that. You do beta testing, you do a few rounds of that. And it's really involved testing. You're watching people as they're playing, so you're seeing how they're interacting with this, whatever the puzzle mechanics are. You're getting their feedback afterwards. And so you can sort of iterate and distill and gradually approach what it is you're going for. Now, as someone who just creates fan missions for fun, we do, I always try to do some thorough beta testing, for my missions to make sure that there aren't bugs. But you can't do nearly the same depth in that you could, if you were trying to release a AAA title. So it's much harder to hit that balance. And I think that's why many more puzzles, including some of my own, I think miss the mark a little bit. Like, there are certainly some of my puzzles that, now having seen other people play, I go, oh, well, that one was clearly too easy. No one's getting stumped by it. And, oh, that one was clearly too hard. Almost nobody is getting it. But I think, there's some learning that happens from that. So hopefully, when I make my next mission, I'll be a little bit closer to getting that balance right.
I remember. I'm sorry. Because
go ahead.
I remember when I was part of the beta of Malazar's Inscrutable Tower, and so at that time I got an insight of how a mission like that can evolve during the beta testing. And what was just a simple example, so for the people who played it, when you remember the library and there are those teleports, they were really confusing at the beginning because there was no indication of where the next teleport leads you. No, is it leading to ABC or is it to EFG or whatever? So that was just a simple thing like that that was an idea. I think it was from me actually when I said, wouldn't it be just easier to just tell the player because it doesn't take away from the teleporting system, but it's just not as frustrating. That was just one simple thing to find a solution. But of course, sometimes, maybe your beta testers don't stumble upon the problems another player would later, So I think it's really hard, but so the more impressed I am how you do it. And I think in most cases, the balance is pretty right. And at the end of the day, you have the forums, so.
Well, the forums are great for... Oh, you mean like ex post? I can see what people are asking questions on and what people are stumbling on?
Yeah, I mean, the player at the end has the forum. If you cannot go on, because as you said, like it's not a AAA game, so you have just limited access to beta testers and stumbling upon possible problems. But then you have hundreds of players later. So I think you can say, okay, if this didn't work out perfectly, it's still just a for free fan mission, and so much effort was put into this anyways. So it's I think it's fine if it's not perfect all the time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I know. So in my beta testing, Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel and Dielya's the Sunken Temple of Dielya, those evolved a little bit through the beta testing process. There were, some bugs and things like that came up that I had to smooth out, but there weren't any sort of big changes. My first mission, Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb, the projection room puzzle, and we can talk more about this later, but that one...
Yeah, we will.
The way that I had set up where it was you were supposed to go was just like so off the wall obscure. To me, it made perfect sense. And I had a team of 4 good beta testers, and they were 0 for 4. They were just like, I have no idea what the heck is going on in this room, what I'm supposed to do. And then I, stupidly, because instead of just thinking like, oh, that means I should change it, I was like, oh, well, I'll just explain it to them. I explained it, and they were like, yeah, that still makes no sense. No one is going to get this. And then I came up with an alternative way to do it, which was just, the way that you've now seen it in the mission, which is so much better.
So
without the thousands of hours of beta testing, you can still get, really, really helpful feedback for calibrating these things.
So you're talking about the room where you have to figure out the code with
exactly.
So can we already jump into that?
I'm happy to.
So please, Jake, can you explain, what the puzzle is about?
The code?
With the code, with all the different elements in the room, like where you have to look from a certain position, so you get the 3 digits out of all the things that are floating around there. Or Seth, go on. Maybe you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a room in Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb where there's a perspective puzzle, and there's a riddle that tells you how to position yourself in the room. There's an indication on the floor of where you need to stand, and then when you look upwards, all of the floating shapes in the room are in a forced perspective that allows you to see that they are a code.
And the thing is, that's a good example, I think. When I was going into that room and I saw all those shapes floating around, I knew, okay, I've seen things like that. For example, in that one Sherlock Holmes games where you have to make some conclusions with a similar mini game. And I knew what to do, but actually the little puzzle about the positioning misled me.
Oh, do tell.
I don't know. At the end, it was just like trying randomly, until I was like, this could be. So, spoiler alert, by the way, for everything. So, I think it was 937 or something.
Or 937, yeah.
Yeah. So, I was like, okay, this could be like a 3, and also I must be close, So I worked my way around it, so until I got closer and closer to seeing numbers. Um, but it was possible to solve, even without getting the hints right or maybe misled by them. But it was still possible. But what I wonder is, how did you do that? How did you know how to position all these objects so that they are, that you're able to see something you can work with at the end? So I don't know. How much
That's a
time
really-
did it take?
It's a good question, because for anyone who hasn't worked with Drumed, you can't just click and drag things around either. You have to move everything by the numbers.
Exactly.
Well, you can just click and drag if you're willing to maybe break everything.
We've got a dangerous man on our hands.
But before I answer that question, I just want to know. So, Alex, had you found the scrolls in the room with the cracked floor before going into that? The room with the forced perspective? Those scrolls misled you, or you just hadn't found the scrolls yet?
I found the scrolls. I found text that talks about that. I don't know the exact wording anymore, but I know that there was a scroll that was talking about this. And when I when I then entered the room, I was like, okay, this has to do something with that. Something to do with that. Sorry. So I knew that there has to be a thing, but I was confused, but that's the other thing. Like, it could be clear for you even after beta testing and working together with the testers, and then you found the solution for those 4 people, maybe, that works for them. But then an Alex comes around and he's like, he maybe reads things differently, and then he takes the wrong clues out of it, or is confused as I was, So, but that's that's not the mistake by you in the creational process. It's not my mistake either. It's just like how things happen in such a complex thing.
So on that note, I was going to ask Matt, how much beta testing did this mission take? Do you think, like in terms of man hours?
That's a good question. So I didn't ask them, hey, how much time did you spend on each round? I think it went through 3 rounds of sort of iterative improvement, and then a final round where everything was, deemed good to go. The mission, that one is pretty short. I think even if you're pretty completionist, probably you can get it done in 30 minutes or less if you know what it is you're trying to do. So it maybe took them a little bit of time the first time around because they didn't know everything. And the puzzles stay more or less the same. So testing the subsequent rounds is fairly straightforward. So dozens of person hours probably. Not the hundreds or thousands that you would expect out of, a major game, but they still, that mission changed an enormous amount for the better through that testing process. Like, if I had released it as it originally was, or even if I had just fixed all the bugs, there weren't a ton of bugs, but there were a handful. People would have never played another mission by me again. They'd be like, what the heck is going on with this Trefoilknot guy? These missions are terrible.
But back to my question before, how did you do it?
How do I do it? So it's not as difficult as you might first think, which is, I think, going to be my answer for a lot of the technical stuff. So what I did, first thing I did is I decided what is the perspective the player needs to have. I picked, the point on the floor. Should they be crouched? Should they be standing? Should they be jumping? And that's sort of all you need for, where the perspective is going to be. Then all it was navigating in game mode to the point where I wanted the perspective to be from. So walking to the right place on the floor. In my case, I decided on crouching as what you need to do to get into the sort of final position. And then from that position, then you use Alt-R, Alt-R to exit back into Dromed, but completely perfectly maintaining the perspective point. So you're going back into Dromed, and the camera is positioned exactly where the player camera was in-game. So now I'm in Dromed, but in the 3D window, as long as I don't navigate the camera, I'm looking at the world exactly the way I want the player to be looking at the world. And so then I just create a block. I sort of pick a size and a distance. The further away I want it to be, the larger I have to make it. The closer I want it, the smaller I make it. So I just sort of, randomly pick a size and a distance for each block. And then I drag it around in the 2D planes while just looking in the 3D view until it's about where I want it to be. And then once I'm happy with where it is, I optimize, and you hope that it doesn't break. Because the problem is, as Seth was saying, it doesn't handle this very well when you're just, so I had to turn the grid usage off, which means that Dromed wasn't snapping these things to nice, convenient places in the world, because then they would be off from where I needed them to be for the perspective puzzle. So I was positioning these things at these really awkward coordinates, rotating them at these really awkward angles. Fortunately, they never had to intersect with each other. They were never too close to each other. So for the most part, there were a couple that I positioned and Dromed broke on me and, told me that wasn't going to work. But it was basically just through a little bit of trial and error. You figure out a place where Dromed will allow it to be. You save, right, and then you position the next one, and there was a little bit of fiddling to do at the end to just get it all perfect. But that was about the extent of it. Now, what made it especially difficult, really, is you sort of had to do the whole thing in one go, because the navigation in Thief is continuous enough. It's not very discrete. Garrett's movements. So even trying to navigate to exactly the same place again in game mode, you wouldn't be able to get to precisely where you had gotten. And so if I sort of navigate to one place, then go back into Dromed to position some blocks, then go into game mode again, and then navigate there again, trying to get to the same place, it's actually a slightly different perspective. And so now if I'm trying to place all these blocks, it'll be slightly off from where you want it to be. And then it means that there's no one perspective you can find that makes the whole code look nice. It would always look a little bit messy, or you'd have to move a little bit to look at one number versus the next. So that was really what made it sort of painstaking, is if I messed up, right, if I accidentally moved the camera, if I accidentally went into game mode, which is for a lot of Dromeders, I think, sort of a reflex. You optimize, you reportalize everything, and then you go into game mode to check it out. It's like, no, okay, I can't go into game mode. I can't go into game mode until I've finished this whole thing. So I messed that up a few times, pulled out a few clumps of hair in the process. But then I had it. So really the main trick was just positioning the camera so that then in Dromed I was seeing the 3D view that I wanted the player to be able to see.
Interesting.
From there, it really was not so bad.
How many objects are there? How many different shapes did you use? Do you know that?
I don't know off the top of my head. Several dozen, certainly. I mean, the 9 had probably like 15 or 20, right? Just in that single number.
But so people just play Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb. It's really impressive when you see that. And I think the good part about this is you don't have, those pieces don't have to line up perfectly. I think at the end you can at least rely on the intelligence of the players a bit, that they can make numbers out of, I would say, rough shapes and, finger quotes. It's really impressive. And in comparison, for what I just earlier said in the Sherlock Holmes game that I talked about, Sherlock Holmes game, there you always had to line up the whole picture perfectly. And this was actually pretty annoying sometimes. So I think in your puzzle, you have some, you don't have to be perfect. So, until you get the idea of, you can trial and error and find it even without a clue, I think. So yeah, it's a great puzzle, I would say, and I've never seen something like that in a Thief mission.
Can I make an embarrassing admission?
Yes.
Please.
First thing I did when I got in that room was try to start climbing up all the shapes.
That was my intention. Like, I would try that, but is it possible?
It is not.
Yeah.
I mean, unless maybe you were able to break it in a way. I know that you were able to break Dielya in some ways I didn't intend.
I was.
But no, so I put an invisible screen that keeps the player sort of bounded in that room, because I knew, like, that of course is going to be your first inclination, is like, oh, let me try to climb on some stuff here. You might be able, yeah. But no, there's an invisible screen, so it maybe breaks some players' immersion because they can't jump through what they feel like they really should be able to jump through.
That is something you have to be aware as a thief author as well. Like I remember, I know when you play like nowadays older missions that were not made with a new mental in mind, that nowadays you can get so much out of boundaries in the old missions, because back in the days it wasn't possible to get up there and yeah. So but you have to think of really many things players would do. For example, in Dielya's temple, where it was me on my Let's Play where I where I figured how to make the jump with the stone in your hands or throat, but it's still possible, I think, right, Seth?
Yes, I also broke it in a slightly different way. So what I did was I took the rubble up the stairs to the broken bridge, and as I dropped between the cracks, threw it and dropped it on the opposite side of the bridge, sacrificing a little health. And through trial and error, I was able to do that and then jump across and land on top of it and pick it up and carry it to the pressure plate. So I also broke your mission.
And that was the already updated version, right?
Yes, yeah,
so
it was.
You both played the same patched version. So what I patched before Alex played it was an even easier way, which was initially was that you could just drop the rock at the very edge of one bridge, jump across to the other, and then lean forward and pick up the rock. So you didn't even have to do anything sort of impressive with the maneuvering or take a health hit. You know, you could just drop the rock, jump across, lean, and grab it.
Okay.
Damn, so I overcomplicated it.
So I made it. I was better than you, Seth. I didn't lose health.
Alex, you're always better than me.
So then, Alex, by the time you did your Let's Play, I had fixed that, because I saw that and I was like, well, this is super unacceptable. Like, I can't just allow such an easy way to break.
It was not that easy, actually.
Well, speak for yourself, Alex. Idiots like me, we find our own complicated way to solve these problems.
I mean, but yeah, so my feeling on that, I mean, it's tricky. So I have players at both ends of the spectrum. Like, if I look on the TTLG thread, I had a couple things that were, that bridge jump is freaking impossible. I have to, I keep trying it and I keep, not being able to make it across. Even without the rock, the jump is too wide, it's too difficult, it's too finicky. And then I have other players who are like, oh, well, I'm comfortable enough with the controls, even with this rock slowing me down. I can still make it across, it's no problem.
Those are the guys who know how to strafe jump.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so it's...
But it's interesting.
Strafe jumping, I think it should be a little tricky. But I think the real problem there, partly it's that it's a speed build. And so there's just a certain amount of polishing and, smoothing out the rough edges that can't happen in a 2-week period, unless you want to do just, something incredibly simplistic for your mission. I think in my mind, I had set up the fact that the rock slows you down. I immediately when I saw Brethren post the speed build thing, he was like, in 48 hours we're going to start a speed build, so start brainstorming. Like, I was like, all right, I can do 2 weeks of Dromed. What do I want to do? Clearly a puzzle mission. What do I want it to be about? And I had already figured out the portal thing, which we'll get to in a little bit. So I knew I wanted to use that. So I was just brainstorming sort of interesting mechanics to interact with the portal. And the first thing I came up with was, the rock slows you down. Maybe I could use that in an interesting way. Like, there's a jump you can make without it, but you can't make it with it, so you have to, find another way around. And I had sort of tethered myself too closely to that. And then by the time the 48 hours was over and it was time to open up Dromed and actually, make the thing, realizing a little too late, the rock doesn't actually slow you down enough to create a big enough gap between what you can accomplish with it and what you can accomplish without it. So it was like trying to straddle this really fine line, which I think, led to some suboptimalities in the way the mission is put together. Now, subsequent to release, VFig sent me a message on the Discord, and he was like, hey, the rock doesn't slow you down enough, so you're sort of straddling this line, basically making exactly the point I'm making here. And more importantly, he had a solution for me. He said, how about if I just write a script that makes the rock slow you down a little bit more and make the jump much, much more difficult with the rock? And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And so he had a couple other things that I think I eventually want to implement and patch in to make sort of a remastered version, which is taking the same, base mission, but polishing it up a little bit more than you could in a 2-week speed build, and eventually re-release it. So maybe you guys can play it without being able to break it in that same way.
No, then I don't want to play it anymore.
I wasn't able to break it. I wasn't smart enough. I had to do it the real way. You saw
What's the
video.
real way?
With a teleport,
Mhm.
right?
The right way.
That's so we are already 40 minutes in. We didn't talk about the hotel mission at all, but
sorry about that.
that's no, it's fine. No, I think it's so. So let's now go on with the let's go on with the pre-talk, because Jake, maybe you can explain like how to solve the Dielya's what do you call rubble puzzle for real.
Yeah, so you have to take the rock. There's a portal, right, that goes through to the study and goes to like the beginning area, and you have to like take the rock through the portal, like hit the button, and then like go back through, basically, to sort of, it's a puzzle basically. I mean, if you correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but it's basically like a, not perspective, but it's a location puzzle, or so I don't know how you'd say that.
I think it's actually many things in one thing, because first of all, it's a timing-based puzzle.
Yep.
So the basic premise is you are in a room and there's a machinery with buttons and or levers. But you can activate things. So you can activate a portal between two poles, I would say, and it's so impressive. It's so hard to explain, but it's like in the game Portal, basically. So you can turn it on and then it's there. So you can walk into it and then you are at a different place. But if you walk next to the portal, you are still in the room, and it's so impressive. And I think we will soonly go on with the details how you made that possible. So you have to make some interesting thinking, like, okay, I cannot go there with the or jump across the bridge. Most people can't, but if I go through the portal, okay, this works. And then you figure out that if you turn off the portal, it takes like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 seconds until the portal is actually gone. So you have to make the thinking like, okay, so while this portal shuts down, I can still go through it, but then it's gone. So when I turn around in the new room I am in, the new area, suddenly I can see the rest of that room because now the portal is gone. I hope that was somehow understandable, but
Perfectly.
So if you haven't played it, so you have to play it anyways before, and we gave a spoiler alert, so people should have played it by now. So that's really interesting, and you have to do so much thinking, you know? You have to be aware of the geographics of the mission, like where does it bring me, and what does that help me for different puzzles. There's also that with a candle. And then you have to find out that timing thing, like, oh, wait, the portal isn't shutting down immediately when I push the lever. And, you know, there's so much thinking involved. And Yeah, but please tell us, for some not so educated people, how did you make that? Because portals are used very often in Thief games, and like in Malazars or in the hotel, they are used in a very subtle way, but you can still see the portal effect somehow. But this is really fluid and perfect, and it's within the room, and that is. I think still many Drome editors are there. Like, how does it work? So enlighten us, please, Matt.
Sure. Before I do, one quick clarification with the rubble puzzle is you don't have to figure out the sort of timing shutdown thing for the rubble puzzle. You need that for the candle puzzle.
All right.
The
Yeah.
rubble puzzle, you could go the longer way. So it's quicker and more clever if you figure out the timing thing. You can do the rubble just by dropping the rubble through the portal and turning off the portal and then going the long way, jumping across the bridge without, and then you'll end up, where the rubble is.
So I did it, yeah.
You don't have to figure out, I wanted it to be that, figuring out the sort of delay in the portal was sort of, for the last challenge, you need that. So if some people figured it out early and they were able to do that for the rock, it probably made the candle puzzle easier. But if you didn't figure that out, and I think a lot of players didn't figure that part out early on in their playthrough, so they did the rock either the breaking the mission way, or by dropping the rock, turning off the portal, and then going the long way around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how does this portal work? So there's sort of three aspects of it. So there's the player teleportation, right? Getting the player from one place to another. Then there's the object coherency bit, which is making sure that sort of the game world preserves information about, where objects are, whether they've been dropped in one place, whether they've been picked up, whether a gate is open or closed. Because what you have is you have multiple different copies of all of these places. You have 3 libraries, you have 3 atria, and you have 7 portal control rooms. And so, like there's the gems, the 3 gems on the pedestal in the end cap of the portal control room. So if you've picked them up in one of these rooms, I need to make sure that you've picked up that same one in all 7 of these portal control rooms. And if you've dropped the rock through, I need to make sure that, that information is retained across all of these copies. And then the last bit is the rendering tricks. And I think that's sort of what makes Dielya special. The player teleportation actually is pretty vanilla in this. So it's nothing you wouldn't find in Malazars or Temple of the Tides or trying to think. I think Sepulchre of the Sinistral used fixed teleportation rather than relative teleportation, so it's a little bit different there, but not all that different. But as far as the teleportation goes, I'm just using the script is called Trap Move Relative. And so basically what it does is it moves the player seamlessly to exactly their location plus some offset. So I can, move them up 128 units or down 128 units. And what makes it smooth versus not smooth is really just the author really taking the time to make sure that the spaces that the player is moving in between are really perfectly identical in all the ways that you don't want there to be a difference. So clearly you need there to be the same architecture. What a lot of people don't get right is the texturing, because if you just make multiple copies of the same room, a lot of textures will have a little bit of an offset in one place versus another. And so that can create these sort of jarring texture pops. Of course, draw your eye as a player. You walk through this thing and then all of a sudden, like, you see this little flicker. So in terms of what makes the teleportation smooth, I didn't do anything sort of technical there to make it any smoother than what you'd find in other places. Honestly, I think in say, Malazar's Inscrutable Tower, I thought it was pretty smooth there as well.
Yeah.
I think he did a pretty good job of that. I don't remember. I mean, there were places where I sort of knew as a designer, like, oh, there must be a teleport here because that's why you would make a hallway that wraps in this way, is because he's hiding a teleport. But there was never like a moment where I went, there was the teleport. I saw it.
That's true. That's true. But here, and I think that is the impressive part, because you actually let me see a portal, so I know that I'm walking through a portal, and that's the difference. So of course I'm even looking more for this, so, and it still doesn't, it works perfectly, and yeah.
So the object coherency is actually, that was the hardest part, believe it or not. That was the only part that, going into the 2-week speed build window, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make that work. I knew I was going to be able to get the portal and the rendering to work because I'd already experimented with these techniques, so I knew how to do that. Getting the objects to stay coherent from one copy of a room to another, that's what I had to learn on the fly for this. And Yandros helped me out a bit with some ideas for that. That ended up being by far the hardest part of making this mission. But the rendering is, I think, what people are probably most interested to hear about, because I think that's what makes my portal different from what they've seen before in other missions. And it's a new trick, and it required some sort of front-end work, but the mechanics of it are actually very, very simple. And the basic trick to it is to use a bunch of object facsimiles. So you can create brushwork. When you use brushwork, Dromed is very rigid about how that brushwork behaves, right? It has to be permanent. You could alter the texture of brushwork on the fly in-game, but you can't change anything else about its properties. You can't make something solid that used to be air. You can't make it air if it used to be solid, right? You can't do any of that. You can't move it around. But you can turn brushwork into an object, and then you can, fiddle with the object in Blender or whatever you need to do, and then import it back into Thief as an object. It will look exactly like brushwork for the most part. It responds differently to lighting, which is why you'll notice in Sunken Temple of Dielya, the behind the portal is totally dark. Right?
Yep.
The lighting is set to just the baseline ambient lighting. Because if you try to light it, then you'll see, like, oh, the shadows don't fall as nicely as they do in other places in the mission. That's because objects don't light as well. So I just, made that totally dark. And then what I can do is I can just put this object there. When that's an object rather than brushwork, Dromed lets me be way more flexible with it. And in particular, what it allows me to do is it allows me to specify when it does or doesn't render. So brushwork will always render, right? It doesn't matter, how obstructed it is or anything like that. Dromed is going to treat brushwork like brushwork. But an object's render priority can be changed in its properties. The idea here, this is an old engine that was designed to be played on old hardware. Maybe you wanted to save some of the CPU or GPU load by just saying, hey, if this object is, behind a semi-transparent window, no need to render it. Right? Just don't deal with calculating, how that should look if it's partially obstructed. And if you set the render order to the lowest possible priority, that means that even if it is perfectly in view, obstructed only by something completely transparent, it still won't render. And so what that means in terms of how I was able to fold this into that portal control room is basically, so you have these 7 different versions of the portal control room. One of them is the portal control room when the portal is off. One of them is the portal control room when it's on and you're looking into the library. Now, if you were to actually look at the brushwork, what you'd really see is that this is a portal control room that is just sort of open at the end. It doesn't have the little bit with the 3 pedestals. It has the 3 pedestals, but it doesn't have any of the surrounding architecture. and it just opens right up into the library. So looking through the portal, it's the library. Looking around the portal, it's still the library. Then what I can do is I can take the object facsimile of that end cap, right? The sort of square rectangular bit off the edge of the, right behind the arch in the portal chamber where the pedestals with the gems are. And so I can have that there obstructing the player's view of the library. I can say, but don't render any part of this object if it's obstructed by anything. And then through the arch, I put this sort of magic transparent screen that all it does is it stops the rendering of that object so that when you're looking through the arch, the object behind doesn't render and you're seeing the library. When you look around the arch, there's nothing obstructing your view, so that part of the object does render. So it's actually... The tricky bits are creating the object facsimile, and then there are some restrictions that places on you in terms of what the surrounding architecture can be like. So for example, I wouldn't be able to put a pillar in the middle of the library out of brushwork, because then you would see that when you were, sort of looking around the archway, because that would, if it was inside what was supposed to be the portal chamber. So there are a couple of restrictions that it places on you. Really, the trick to making that work is just making sure that the object facsimile of what, you're ostensibly looking into doesn't render when you look through the arch, but does render when you look around the arch. That can be accomplished just with that sort of see-through screen in the archway itself. That make sense?
Makes sense to me.
It's for me, with the language difficulty, it's hard for me to follow, but I think I get the basic idea. So I'm really appreciate that you really explained this so detailed and try to make it understandable. It's fine for me so far.
Can I pose a question?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Does that mean that when the player pulls the lever in the portal room, that they are cleverly being teleported to one of the other 7 teleporter rooms so that it can... Okay, I get it.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
so
cool.
the teleports, there are way more teleports than you probably think happening. There's one when you walk through the portal chamber. When you walk through the arch, you're teleporting, and everybody sort of expects that.
That's the obvious one.
Yeah. What they don't expect is that you teleport when you flip the switch, or if you're, flipping the power switch, you teleport, 5 seconds after you flip the switch. I don't remember the exact delay. But not only are you teleporting, the entire control panel in front of you is teleporting with you. The switch that you flip moves 128 units, to the right or the left or up or down, depending on, what context you're in, at the same time that Garrett does. And so that's really important, because what I was trying to do at first was have it be let's just have the switches linked to keep the object coherent. So if Garrett switches this one, that will, sort of send a signal to the other switch to flip. But the problem is that happens with a delay. It's a slight delay. You'd have this weird thing where you'd flip the switch, you'd teleport, and then you'd see the other switch just finishing its motion. Which didn't look good. Instead I set it up so when you flip the switch, you teleport, from the sort of, the atrium to the library portal chamber or back. And the switches teleport with you. If you dropped the rock in the portal chamber with you, it's teleporting back and forth with you as well.
So
that's very cool.
So how I knew that I could kind of follow your explanations was I got the same idea after within your explanation. I was like, oh, there must have been more teleports than they occurred to me. So yeah, my mind is blown. I'm really impressed, really.
I'm glad it's appreciated, because that was A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that.
I can imagine, and what I like is that you basically everything you explained so far, not just the portal, but everything we talked about by far. I was like, yeah, basically it's simple, and and then you're like, boom, like a whole chalkboard full of arrows and numbers, and I imagine you like the professor you are lecturing, like and then you have to take a letter to write some little piece in the corner, and then at the end the students are sitting there like, wow, it's amazing.
It's simple in the sense that you guys had nicked on a couple weeks back to talk about Malazar's, and you remember his statues where if you look at them,
some people remember them, some people didn't play it so far.
Well, you got to play that. What I mean when something is simple versus complicated. So he posted a tutorial on TTLG about how he did that, and there's like 27 steps. So that to me is not simple, right? Like if if you're comfortable with Dromed, you can implement exactly what he did. And I've done it before. I've never, put it in a mission, but I've tested it out and gotten it to work the way he has it set up. It was dozens of steps and then some. What I mean that this is simple, like there's some back-end work that needs to get done. And some of it can be a little bit tedious. But there's basically like 5 or 6 steps.
And some repeating, I guess. So you just need to figure out like the basic stuff, and then it's more of a repetitive work, I can imagine, and detail work, as you said.
Yeah. It's you create the portal chamber, and then you can clone that, and you can move it up and down, move it left and right, and all of that is fairly simple. Now, when I initially planned out the mission, I actually planned it out in a way, how I said, the part I had to learn on the fly was the object coherence. So the hardest thing by far was, which 2 of you didn't ever get to appreciate because of the way you solved the rock puzzle, but the hardest thing by far was getting the rock to play nicely with the portal. And I initially had the whole thing was stacked vertically. And I realized that just can never work well the way I want this rock to work. So I had to sort of break it up into 2 different vertical towers, one for the atrium and one for the library. So you teleport left or right when you go between the atrium and the library, and then you teleport up and down when you walk through the portal. It was a huge headache with like 2 days left in the speed build window, having to like just completely tear that all down and restructure it, because all of those teleports I had to re-specify how they teleport the player, or else somebody's going to end up in brushwork, or they're going to not teleport, or they're going to teleport to the wrong place. So yeah, thinking things through ahead of time certainly would have saved me a bit of a headache there.
Yeah, but I think it's even more impressive that you did something like that on the fly, I would say, for a time-limited competition in that case. And then it's, and the mission is not only this portal thing, then there's, of course, the thing, I would call, it's a key hunt, literally. And you also had to do that, like, because the player can come from, can walk through that little maze or whatever you want to call it, and every player can come differently, and so you have to make that. And then there's one question I want to put in, like, there are those beasts in the mission, and we talked about that in our last episode, I guess. Just shortly, that those they are like not moving at the beginning when you start the mission, but they have this little movement every once in a while. Was that intentional, or is it just because I think you said that because of the animation routine that it was unavoidable?
I assumed that it was a looping animation.
Right.
Yeah. So is it intentional? So that's a really interesting question.
Can I guess? Because I said yes, I think it's intentional, but but I wonder if I'm right.
So is a bug that I solved and then decided to leave in. I don't know how you want to, whether you want to call it. It was not my initial intent. My initial intent was they are just stoic stone statues. They don't do anything. They just sit there being a little bit creepy and imposing. And then you pick up the hourglass, and while you're holding it, they're trying to kill you. And it works exactly like that if you play it in Dromed.
Uh-huh.
When you play it, if you Iron Man it. So this is the thing. So Seth, I think you were saying, oh, I wish there was like a delay or it waited a little bit before they started moving because you kind of get sick of their little flinches by the end, which I think that's true. But there actually is, in some sense, a delay because they won't start moving until you reload a save. So if you Iron Man the mission, they are going to be stoic stone statues until you pick up the hourglass.
But then there's a problem because the platform,
Exactly.
where you can get stuck. Most players will try that out, and then they are forced to reload, and
well, they could restart
automatically
in like the first 10 seconds.
Who does that, really? Who does like, oh no, I just made a quick save, but let's restart. Maybe there's a flickering animation triggered.
I thought it was
if you're
funny.
the type of player who quick saves as soon as you start a mission, which I am as well. Yeah,
I am
a lot
too.
Of players, they break it. I mean, I don't know if you want to call it breaking, but they're starting from an unclean start, basically right out the gate. Or if they don't do that, a lot of people miss the jump across the bridge the first time, and so then they'll have to reload there. I think for a lot of players, they spend their whole playthrough with these things flinching. And the reason for that is, so basically, the way it's set up is that as soon as the game starts, they're sent a signal to freeze. And then they don't get the unfreeze signal until the hourglass is picked up. There's something kind of squirrely about the way the game handles restarts, which is then it just periodically the things are unfrozen and have to be refrozen. And so what you're seeing is these sort of unfrozen for just a moment, but then they're refrozen.
But I think it adds to a cool effect because I liked it. Of course, maybe it was a bit much after a while, but like Seth, like you said it, like, yeah, guys, I'm coming to you later, but still, I liked it because it gave me a creepy moment, so it was good.
So can I describe my experience with them?
Yeah, of course.
So what happened for me was I was descending the stairway, and I do what you do. I save at the beginning, just because I don't want to have to go through all the screens again. I want to just be able to hit a quick load button and restart if I need to. So I came down the stairs. I didn't notice the statue. I tripped and fell between the bridges and lost health. Well, crap. I reloaded. I came down the stairs. I went around the corner and looked through the door, and there's the statue at the opposite side of the bridge. And what did it do? It twitched, and it scared the shit out of me. So the first one was extremely effective, and I was like, oh, this is really setting the tone. And then what happened is I just kept seeing the twitch over and over, and I'm like, okay, now you're tipping your hand. So at first, it was actually really effective, and it really, really sold me. It's just eventually it became something that I couldn't unsee. So I was like, I could never forget that they were going to come to life. I could never just immerse myself in the mission and not worry about it, so that it could jump scare me later.
So I think if I had... Go ahead.
May I just, because Jake is so quiet, I would wonder what was your opinion or your impression on those things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people can go see it on my YouTube channel. I did a playthrough of it, but I thought at first when those statues were twitching, I assumed that it was me, that my eyes were playing tricks on me, or that something was glitched with my game or with the computers that was really effective. And also, like, I kind of had an idea that something was up because obviously Matt can talk about this more if he wants to, but it's sort of the ruins are patterned off of like the Iliad ruins from Oblivion, right? Specifically.
Yeah, that's right.
So I knew that because oftentimes things like that happen in those ruins, right? Like things come to life or something shoots out at you, especially like statues in those ruins usually sometimes will shoot projectiles at you. So that was sort of really kind of neat for me because somebody who loves Thief and also played Oblivion, to have that sort of I was oh, I remember this, this is familiar. And then I remembered all those other, there's a lot of traps and puzzles in those ruins as well. So that was really cool for me.
Yeah, I mean, so I think ultimately I decided to keep the flinch because I did find a way to suppress it and just have them be totally still. But I think, like you guys are saying, it creates this sort of unsettling vibe. And so that's why I decided to leave it in. But I do think it would have been more effective if it could have been less frequent. If instead it's happens every 5 seconds or something, if it could be every 20 seconds, so you typically wouldn't catch it, then occasionally you would see it. I think that would have been more effective. But I don't know.
You could do a script that it just this specific statue would do that. When you cross it or something like that, where you could really have the whole control over the effect. But I think in general it still works, and has some, as you said, some creepy tension to it. So I think it's a nice addition, actually.
I think it's French Decay who used a similar mechanic in Breathing Corpses. I don't know if you guys have seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, but there's a scene where a man blends into a painting and then attacks the protagonist, and it's like a sort of a jump scare. And French Decay used, Matt, the same technique you used to freeze a zombie textured like the wall texture, and then triggered it to unfreeze when you picked up loot, and then it scares the life out of you. So yeah, it's definitely been done before, Alex, the suggestion you make about having it have a script trigger the movement.
Or in the Bathory campaign, in the first mission, I don't know if you guys played it, but when you are in the final building in the tower, and then there is a room that you come up the stairs, and then there are I think 4 knight armors just standing there as decoration, and every player is thinking
when's this gonna drop?
And they don't, they're just there, but still, it's I think even with this little tinching, you call it or not, I think the effect, there are pros and cons to effect or not effect, with the movement, but yeah, I think it doesn't ruin the mission, so it's consumable, I would say. But I think let's, there was this little small mission you once did. It's called the Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel, and so let's start with that. Is that okay for you guys, or is there any detail you want to discuss about Dielya or Bertrand's?
I am ready to go to Hilbert's Hotel.
Real quick before we move on, I was going to ask about the connection to Oblivion. So was that something? So was that something that was inspired? Is this sort of a lore thing? Is it a thing because of just having those 2 weeks to do the mission for the speed build competition? Maybe explain more about the Iliad ruins and the Oblivion connection, because the music is there too, right? I think you used the music track.
Yep.
Yeah, I used the music. I used a bunch of textures. And then obviously, the name Dielya is just Iliad backwards. So why did I want to do it that way? I mean, so I have recently, I just recently replayed a bunch of Oblivion. I was sick for a couple days and basically spent the whole time up in my office playing Oblivion and realizing, I really like this. It's very nostalgic. But these tombs are a bit tedious. They have these puzzles that are kind of lame. Wouldn't it be cool if there was the atmosphere of an Iliad ruin, but better puzzles and not just hours of hacking at trolls or skeletons. So that was sort of the inspiration. As I said, like, I bet I could do a fan mission that was sort of like Alien Ruin-ish, but more of a fun puzzler, and less of just sort of a slog through another dungeon. And this was just a couple weeks before Brethren posted the contest thing. And so when he posted that, he just sort of said, like, well,
The light turned on.
perfect. Yeah.
I mean, they say in game design, you have to make the games that you would want to play, right? So I think that's a great example of doing just that.
Exactly. Yeah. Not necessarily the games other people want to play, but hopefully others will enjoy as well.
I'm pretty sure they will. Yeah, but good point, Jake, because I think that was actually an obvious theme. So it's really great to know where it comes from. So, Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel, because people will get mad when they read the title, and then it's,
It's all Dielya by this Cloverloop guy who's not even on the call.
The
yeah.
conversation doesn't start until 40 minutes.
I could put all the titles on the title card, but your names are always so long. It's it's not like being thief or something. It's like Heist at Hilbert's High-Rise Hotel.
Yeah, that's my bad.
No, it's fine. I think they stand out. It's like the violent end of Duncan Melvin is something I remember because I can barely remember any title of a mission, but this I remembered because it was so different. So where do we start?
Who does
Anyone?
who does the Garrett impression?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Well,
good question.
that's Sly Fox.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so he does. I mean, it's nearly perfect.
It's pretty good. I agree. Yeah.
I think
He's
people are actually used to it by now. So it's like actually pretty normal, I would say. Like oh yeah, it's the other Garrett voice,
It's the other Garrett.
the good one.
Yeah. Got the Broken Goddess and Godbreaker Sean Connery Connell voice.
Yeah.
I
No.
kind of like Connell.
It's
But
fun.
let's
Different.
let's not get into this, please. Listen to the episode about Godbreaker, then you will have a discussion with random Taffer. Yeah. No. Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel. Yeah, where do we start, guys? Please, someone give me an entry point.
The briefing.
Okay, so go on, Seth.
Shall I read it from the top? I don't have a good Garrett voice.
Alex, in post, can't you put in the audio from the briefing video?
I can. But this
have
will
to do
take
that.
a lot of time for me to release it today. So Seth, do us the fun, please.
A while back,
wait,
I was
Dave.
contacted by an old associate, Keeper Zermello. That's my awful Garrett.
Okay, I work in the audio file.
He had a job for me. He wanted me to steal a magical gem known as the Aleph Stone, which is currently on display at the Omega Gallery atop Hilbert's Highrise Hotel. I'm not usually eager to run errands for the Keepers, so I just said I'd take it under advisement. Keepers rarely offer to pay, and the Omega Gallery is well known for its state-of-the-art security system. In short, it didn't seem worth the risk. But word on the street is the hotel's alarm system is currently down. This might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They'll surely get it fixed soon, and I don't want to miss my window. After all, it can't hurt to have a keeper who owes you a favor. While I'm there, I should be able to steal more than just the Aleph Stone and some assorted trinkets. The Omega Gallery also hosts additional treasures. The builder's original hammer and chisel, and a rare collection of gems known as the Platonic Crystals. In the right hands, they could fetch quite the price. The alarm system is down, but tonight's heist will prove quite a challenge. The gallery's most precious artifacts are no doubt protected most securely. Not to mention, the hotel has shuttered its usual operations, so posing as a guest is out of the question. But since when do I need a warm welcome to pull off a job? No point in waiting, it's time to begin.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thanks.
But I already downloaded a video of a Let's Play, so I can take the audio from that.
Son of a gun, no one will ever hear me.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to decide what we do later. Yeah, but please, guys, go on. Hello?
Sorry, I had a technical difficulty.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask Matt. You said that it's called Triptych on Infinity, right? That's the title of the series.
Yes.
So why Triptych on Infinity and not Triptych of Infinity?
Why that preposition?
Indeed.
So I guess the way I was thinking, so Triptych of Infinity did occur to me. It was a little too close to Keeper of Infinity, which is another mission campaign in the works. A couple missions are already out, so I was part of it. But my thought was, it's a triptych. So at first I thought you were wondering why I went with triptych, which to me is just like a cooler way of saying trilogy. But it's a triptych about infinity. So it's sort of like on the topic of, rather than being of infinity. Like it's, I don't know. That was sort of my thinking about it. It was so Alex, in German, you would say über, meaning, it means above, but people also mean it to mean like about.
Wow, yeah, that's correct.
So that was sort of how I was thinking about this use of the preposition on here. It's a triptych all about infinity.
There's also, I would like to point out, there's a lot of textbooks and there's some books of like on economics, like that's very common in academic circles to have like
That's
on
very highfalutin.
and then the topic. Yeah, exactly. So I kind of understand it. Once you explained it in that terms, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because I've seen like academic stuff that has like on and then the subject matter. So
yeah, I think there is even a book on infinity.
That sounds about right.
So playing this mission, this reminded me a lot of and I wrote it in the show notes, but it kind of reminded me almost of like a Resident Evil type thing, in that you have this like persistent environment, in this case the hotel, and you're sort of given sort of keys, like literal keys, and you're also given like clues and puzzles, and you kind of have to slowly sort of like unpiece it. So when I was playing the mission, it reminded me a lot of that. Is any of those kind of games like an inspiration to you, or like in terms of the mission design, because you kind of have this like environment that you kind of slowly unpeel in this mission in Hilbert's Hotel?
Unpeel is a good word.
Yeah, it is a good word. And I think that is sort of exactly how I think about it. Now, I haven't played Resident Evil. The way you describe it, maybe I would like it. Maybe I should give it a try. I would say it was more inspired, in terms of the level design aspect of it, by other fan missions that I really like. So I think missions by Ashaktar, I don't know if I'm saying his handle right, but like Broken Triad or Ominous Bequest, especially Ominous Bequest, I think also really had this, where it's like you're first dropped in and you can sort of get into this mansion that you're trying to rob, but a lot of it is inaccessible to you. Similar with like Lady Rowena's Curse, right? You can get in, but there's a ton of locked doors, and there's sort of this interesting story going on around you that wasn't necessarily what you thought you were there for in the first place. But as you're trying to find out how to get into that room, how to get through that door, whatever it is, gradually you get more and more enveloped by that story. And you realize that it is, in fact, not just atmosphere in the background, but it is going to be relevant to, why you're there in the first place. So I think that was sort of more the flavor I wanted, where it was, you're sort of slow. The hotel is sort of constant, right? It's always all there. But as a player, each key you get opens up more of it to you. Each clue you find opens up more of it to you. And sometimes you'll get a clue and it won't be obvious immediately what it's for. But then hopefully, you get the next bit of information and then suddenly it clicks. you realize what it's meant to mean.
Yeah, I really like this kind of design, and I think you would definitely really like the original two Resident Evil games because they are kind of built on that kind of pillar of design where you have this, you don't have many environments, you have this one environment, and you start off with a couple of rooms available to you, and then you have some puzzles and you have some keys, and sort of the satisfaction in the gameplay is like slowly unlocking all these rooms to this place, and then just this feeling of also because you're in this consistent environment that you're exploring, you have this satisfaction of like you get to really know where you're at. And in Resident Evil, it's a mansion and it's a police station. The second game, and in your mission, it's the hotel. But it really gets you familiar with your settings and really to appreciate them, and then also like gives you that satisfaction. Like this mission to me almost gave me that same level of satisfaction you get in like Resident Evil, where you get a key or you solve a puzzle. Your mission has a lot of like great puzzles, and you find new places that you previously were closed off to you. And like we were talking earlier about the perspective puzzle in the earlier mission, and you have this like kind of sense of satisfaction. And I think it's not just like it's puzzles, but it's not just puzzles like it's not just intellectual puzzles, it's also like environmental puzzles, like finding out, okay, like where does this go or how to connect everything. So
I think in a great way, the hotel is the main character of the mission, right? Like its atmosphere is a big part of the draw. Like for me, I felt like the hotel became a character when I figured out I could climb up in the spiral staircase and walk around and drop down the opposite side, and there was an entire area that I hadn't previously accessed. Like I cleared every other floor multiple times. And I don't feel very much like a Thief player saying this, but I had not looked up in the spiral staircase. And I was stumped, and I was thinking like, oh my God, where am I supposed to go? And then I looked up and I saw the wood beam, and I was like, oh my God, okay, maybe this is where I have to go.
But
And
sorry.
no, it's okay.
Go on. Finish your thought. Sorry.
It's a-okay. What I was saying was I climbed up on top of that beam, and the staircase is kind of encompassing itself. And at that moment, I was like, oh, this environment is messing with me. It's like its own character.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So the whole hotel is sort of infused philosophically with the mathematics of Hilbert. And so we can get to this a little bit later, but one of the themes of Hilbert's work and of this hotel is things containing more than you think they should be able to contain. So like a painting having a whole 3D world within it, things like that. And that, in a subtle way, that's exactly what this staircase was supposed to be. It's supposed to be one stairwell. It contains more than that. It's a double helix that contains two stairwells, and so it's very much sort of the whole hotel. I think is full of these little subtle nods to what Hilbert's life's work was about.
I thought that was a great design. It really stumped me.
But I have to say that this, if you don't find that out, because it's not really told to you, and if you don't make that, you have to rope arrow up. If you don't do that, and if you don't figure that out, I think you're pretty stuck.
You could be, but I don't think that's a very demanding solution. Like, as far as Thief mechanics go, that is a very organic mechanic. Haha.
Yes, but if you look at this and you think, okay, there's just that one staircase. Why should I rope up there? That and
could be a gem up there.
Of course, yeah, it could be. I love this, and this is something like when you find that out, it's like mind blowing, and you feel smart or like you're really happy that you tried things out. But I'm just imagining like that to some players that this could be really the end of the mission.
I laughed out loud. Like when I figured it out, I yelped and laughed out loud.
It's genius. And then first, immediately you're thinking like, okay, how did he do that with the architecture in the editor, and how will that look from an outside perspective? And is it actually like that? That's the thing. Like, but if you are like not so, such a professional players like us, then it can be. I'm just saying, I loved it and I figured it out on my own and I was proud of it. But I think this is like one of those things where it's like, if you don't get it, then it's done for you.
So that's the trouble with puzzle missions. I think all of my missions, there are some puzzles and they can be tricky that are, there aren't, at least not intended, workarounds to them. Like there's sort of I don't design sandbox games. I don't even, Thief is clearly immersive sim. I wouldn't say that I try to leverage that in the missions that I make. I'm not making missions that are about player freedom. It's more that I have an idea in mind about what the player's experience should be. And it's malleable, right? There might be different orders you can do things in, but there are a bunch of puzzles, and beating the mission typically means solving each of them in a potentially flexible order. Hilbert's Highrise Hotel had a number of bonus puzzles. Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb as well had some bonus puzzles, so things you wouldn't necessarily have to do. That, I think, is the danger making a puzzle mission, is if you don't solve the puzzle and you feel like it ruins it if you have to consult a forum or something like that, you potentially do, you lose and you alienate players. So I think, it's a risk that you take making missions like this. I think the double helix spiral staircase, I think there are a lot of potential sticking points in this mission where a player, might just rage quit and say, this makes no sense. I have no idea what to do.
Yeah, like I had problems when you have to get the Aleph stone, like how you have to do that. I had to ask Psychosis back in the days when it was released, hey, how do I get this thing? And then he was like, hey, think of the paintings. And yeah, of course. But the genius it is, as you said, like you have to take the risk. On the other hand, people who figure it out, they have such an amazing experience. They a thing they never had before, like with this helix staircase. I admit that.
I remember, so Fen Phoenix, I don't know if you ever watch his channel, but he did a Let's Play of it. And one of my favorite moments is him discovering the double helix spiral staircase. And he's just like, what? You can do that?
Yeah,
moments for that I live for.
It was the same with the portal. Like when he stumbled upon that, he was so mind blown. But may I jump back a bit? What you said, Jake, that like in Resident Evil, that because you travel the whole place and back and forth and until certain passages open up and you get familiar with this place. I would say, in general, I would say yes, but I think this is like my biggest criticism, or my real only criticism I have with that. Since you used a lot of portal stuff, and the way I understood it is that, at least from my playing experience, that there are very separated areas that are not actually connected. So familiarizing with this, with the whole environment for me was really hard. Even after like over 2 hours playing it, sometimes I was like, okay, where do I have to go now? Where was that? Okay, so I have to go there and then take the elevator and, no, there was the other way. I could do this. And it was frustrating sometimes. And yesterday, of course, I wanted to rerun the whole thing, from a safe game. I just wanted to run through the whole thing, read the readables. And after 10 minutes, I was like, oh, no, I'm done, because it's really confusing. Like, is that something you are aware of, and that way you say, okay, I know that this can affect this familiarizing effect with the environment for its cause of what you want to present?
Yeah, so it's really, so if you forget about the paintings, there's really two segments. There's where you enter in the lobby, and then there's the penthouse and the gallery. And there are different teleports, one that takes you to the gallery, one that takes you to the penthouse. But that whole upper area is it's one connected unit. Anywhere in the penthouse can access anywhere in the gallery and vice versa without needing teleports. So I don't think it's incredibly segmented. And I think the segmentation is a bit unavoidable because of the infinite distance between the ground floor and the upper floors.
I see the necessity to that, yeah.
Now, to me, so I think I agree with you that it's a confusing place to navigate. I think of that coming from... I don't think that the ground floors are all that confusing to navigate, though, maybe other people feel differently. I think that the upper floors are confusing to navigate because you have these sort of half levels facilitated by that double helix spiral staircase.
Yep.
Where, from the atrium, you can look up and you can see this hallway going around the atrium. You can see the library below you. But if you go up the spiral staircase, you get taken to neither of those places. Whereas if you go around to the side, towards where the dining room area is, if you already have the key to that side stairwell, that will take you up to that in-between floor. And then the spiral stairs will take you to the offices and the library below. That, I think, is quite confusing to navigate. Which was by design. Maybe a bad design choice, but it certainly was intended to be not quite, Constantine's Manor level of head trippy. I wanted it to be just like, this is not a normal place where normal people would live. This is something weird here.
The rules are different.
Heightened as you progress further and further through the mission. But the teleports themselves... I mean, it's really just the elevators and, of course, the paintings. The elevators, I think, to my mind, they basically function like elevators from the player experience, right? I mean, if you think about a real elevator in real life, it might as well be a teleporter.
Yep, absolutely.
The doors close, you hear the noise, and you get off somewhere else. Now, of course, in the real world, there would be other ways. There'd be a fire escape, there'd be stairs, there'd be other ways to get from point A to point B. Whereas in mine, if you're not taking the elevator, you're not getting to the penthouse or the Omega Suites.
And that's actually, that would have been one of my examples I would have. Like, normally in a normal mission, with a normal design, just a basic building, you would normally explore, and then you would find a staircase up, and then you would find an elevator to the same place. So in your head, this thing, the map in your head creates, and expands naturally, and the different points, they connect. But here it's at that point, sometimes it's pretty hard. Even, of course, you could bring up the argument, of course, but still. The separated areas are for themselves, so you can make the connections there. But still, I don't know. But sometimes yesterday I wanted to go back to the library. I couldn't find it anymore. I just saw it from above. There it is. But
you got to go up the spiral, the double helix spiral staircase.
And then I was like, do I try that now? And then, even then, I assumed that it wouldn't be the right way. So, no, let's, And then I asked you on Discord, like, was there a reflection? And you said no. And I was okay, good. But yeah,
the rooftop pond. Yeah, no reflecting anywhere.
Yeah. I had it in my memory wrong. But no, it's of course, it's up to different brains as well. Some people really would say, yeah, no, I really found navigating this thing really easy. I get lost a lot in huge missions, so so this mission added to that. And I have to admit, like, when I played it the first time in 2020, I gave up at a certain point. Then I came back, and this time, of course, for the podcast, I had to do it. This was my only motivation. Like, okay, I have to finish this for the better. And then, of course, it was fun again after you figure things out. But yeah, sometimes it was. But I don't want to criticize it so much. But this was like my biggest issue with the mission.
And certainly fair criticism. I mean, it's a hard mission. Maybe not hard to the same level as, say, Zontic's King's Story or some of Coelus's missions. I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
The names.
But yeah, it's definitely... When I designed the mission, I sort of knew, like, this is going to be a hard one, and not every player is going to enjoy it. But my motivation is less, like, what can I make that the average Thief player will love? And more, what can I do that'll be new and different that nobody's seen before in a Thief mission that some players will really love?
And I have to say that it's really great that this mission and Malazar's Tower, they came out pretty close together. And
yeah, I think he released that like a month after.
Yeah, right. They were pretty close. So what they made me find out is that I really love puzzle missions. I liked them before, and like Coaxing the Spirit, for example. I don't know if you guys know that. But this is also a little puzzle key hunt mission I adore. And those two missions came out like really close, made me find my love for puzzle missions. I loved them before, but now I knew. And what I also think is when we're just saying like the place, the hotel is like the character, the star of this mission. It's like the whole looks. And like that's another thing I can see in all of your missions, but especially in this one, you not just have like a real thought put into the puzzles and what you want to do, but you also have a really great eye for aesthetics.
Absolutely.
So, like how, like what comes first? Like how? I think the basic progress. Like how do you start, or did you start with this mission? Like, what came first? Like, did you first have like a theme or look in mind, or was it just like, oh, I have those different ideas for different puzzles, or maybe it was all of it together? Like, but I wonder like how you create such a masterpiece with so many different, I would say, construction sites, and then bring them all together.
So it definitely starts with the concept and the puzzles. And then I sort of decide on what I want to design around the puzzles. And the puzzles, they do change over time, and maybe I'll add something, maybe I'll cut something. But that is sort of the backbone of it. And then in terms of the aesthetic, so I have Sunken Temple of Dielya, I had sort of a clear vision in mind for what I wanted the aesthetic to be before I started. I wanted it to be all Ayleid ruin, but then I knew that I wanted the library to have a different sort of warm color, mostly because that would create a really stark contrast through the portal. With the atrium, it's like, oh, you can sort of see that there's something cool going on there, and if you inspect it, maybe it'll really seem interesting. But with the library, it's like a totally different color palette. With my other missions, I tend to be, it's much more sort of free form, where there's not necessarily a ton of coherency between how one section is designed and how another section is designed. Which, some people I think don't like that. They want it to seem like, what a real building might be like in real life. Whereas with this, it's more like I'll have a vision in mind for a particular space. And then I'll make that space. And then I'll have another vision in mind for a different space. And then I just have to find some way to connect the two. So for example, the entryway, I think I was really pleased. Architecturally, that was the first thing I broke ground with in what ended up being the final version of the hotel mission. So I made several starts on this mission and, just kept saying, no, I don't like how it's coming together. I don't like this, and tearing it down. The one that took, I started with the entryway. And the entryway was actually modeled off of a building that I walked past in Philadelphia. And I sort of like saw into this entryway courtyard and just was immediately struck by like a desire to have a rope arrow and be able to explore that place, because it had, it had sort of the little, where the statue, the muse statue with the poem is. It had, there was a little statue in this sort of side courtyard that was elevated, and then to the side of that there was the front door, and then you could go down, and there was a stairwell going down, and then above it all there was this sort of arched ceiling that had these wooden beams. And I was just like, this is such a cool, I just want to capture this. So I took like a dozen photos of it and then got home later that day and said, I just want to make that in Dromad. So that was sort of how I got started. And then once I had that as sort of an anchor point for the hotel, the flow really, I think it went pretty quickly. A lot of the rooms started out as, I would look at other fan mission authors that I really liked their architecture. So there's a lot of influence from Nict. His architecture in the Death's Turbid Veil has a lot of these sort of square tower rooms that have these sort of jutting in edges, and then they have the two-way arched ceilings at the top. And I do a ton of those in this map because I thought those looked so cool in his mission. So I looked in Dromad to see sort of how he put that together. So I built a lot of those in as well. Yeah, I don't sort of start with a coherent idea for how the whole thing is going to be laid out. I sort of go room by room, fleshing it out.
Talking about the first part, the entrance area, I loved that because it reminds me of typical European cities, where you have those alleys, and then there's sometimes a bar where you go down.
Yeah.
And I thought, because I know that you lived in Europe for a while, I thought that this is actually what?
Only 4 weeks.
Yeah, a while. But you spent some time here, so you got an impression. It wasn't just a weekend. So I thought, because this looks really European, from the way it's built, and then with that bar, which is really typical, because if I think of my home city, there are many bars where you go down into the basement, and you put a bar there, which I really liked, and I felt really humbled. And really, I was like, wow, this is so cool. It's simple but so effective. It's beautiful in so many ways, but but it's interesting that's actually Philadelphia, the nothing Europe.
I was gonna say that's really cool because I'm actually from Pennsylvania, so you're putting some.
Oh, really?
I'm from Pennsylvania, so that's really cool.
Pennsylvania boy.
Oh yeah, so that's really neat. I gotta look that up, and I didn't even make that connection. So I'm from the other side, but I've been around the state. So I that's so cool though, that because I've seen we were talking about Oblivion earlier. I know for that game they took pictures of buildings around Washington D.C., for example. So I think that's really cool that you're taking sort of inspiration from real places and kind of melding them into the game. Because it makes it feel more like a real space, because it's partially based on a real space. So in some ways.
Yeah, and I think certainly the lobby area is supposed to feel more natural and more normal. This is just where normal people would go in, and they'd check into a hotel and they'd get keys. Then they have to walk up potentially infinitely many floors. But I wanted that sort of first impression to be, maybe a little weird and creepy, with the fogginess and some of the ambience, but not feel sort of jarring and strange yet.
Maybe it should have been called Hilbert's hiking hotel, because if you just take the stairways, you could hike forever, and then you just go down and check out. Amazing experience. So may I ask, what you said, you took some inspiration from authors that actual architecture you loved. So can you name a few? Who was your inspiration?
Nict is the main one, I would say, when I look for sort of how architectural details are done. So also Lady Rowena's missions in terms of if I have the bones of a room, how do I make the room feel more lived in? I feel like Lady Rowena was just, a master of that. So I tried to. A lot of my rooms, I think, are a little bit sparse, but in the offices, I tried to, make them look a little bit more lived in, and a lot of that was sort of looking at, what she had done in her missions. That had more to do with the object placement than, the actual, bones of the construction.
But because I thought you just said Lady Rowena, because I think Pukey as well is very good at making the details in the rooms. And because I sometimes was remembered at Scarlet's Castle. Of course, it's a hotel as well. I don't know if you played that. But yeah, so
I have.
So I thought maybe there was some inspiration from there as well.
By the time I played that mission, the hotel was basically done. So at least in terms of, the architecture, it was basically finished by the time I got around to playing hers.
Okay.
I think there were a few places, though. So what I really liked in Scarlet Cascabel, especially Mission 2, which did end up creeping in a few places, is I loved the verticality of it.
Right.
Even within a single floor.
And that's what I thought is there I see some similarities.
Yeah, so there were a few places that I reworked based on that hotel, but it was like the bones of the whole mission were already, sort of well established by the time that mission came out. This mission took a long time to bring to fruition. So I think the whole hotel was basically built by the end of 2018.
Yeah, but if you look at it, there's so much you have to think of, and there are so many details. I don't know how far you came to the limits of the editor, but I think you're pretty close.
I was regularly bumping into the cell limit, which, I think that tends to be the one that constrains designers first. I never got anywhere close to the brush limits or the object limits. So I know, I think Sound of a Burrick in the room. I think Skaki was at the edge of every possible limit you could think of in Dromed. I never got any limits other than the cell limits. I think a lot of that had to do with just sort of sloppy construction techniques in the first place, where I wasn't building things in the most efficient way, so I sort of had to learn as I went along. How to be a little bit more efficient, how to pare things down as needed. But for the most part, I don't think the hotel is really pushing the boundaries of what can be done within Dromed.
Just pushing the boundaries of what I can do intellectually.
Yeah, that's more where I'm trying to make headway, I would say, is on the puzzle aspect of it.
So let's go through some of the other puzzles we didn't talk about. One thing that was I still don't get. I could do it just by accident, by just trying, but the Morse code, I didn't really understand that.
Yeah.
Because I could open the door at a certain point by just clicking it, and then suddenly it worked somehow. But I could do it just one time, so the door was inaccessible for me from that side after that. But how does that work? I saw the readable, and there I thought it's I don't know, I don't remember the real sequence, but I thought it's maybe short, long, or something.
Yeah. Dot, dash, dot.
Yeah, short, long, short.
But I didn't get how long should it didn't work for me.
From a technical standpoint, I'm curious because I bet that would explain the answer to Alex's question.
I guess too.
Yeah, so from a technical standpoint, I think it has to be... So, the sort of teaser for that puzzle is the staff-only area, where, it says in the readable, hey, Kevel, rewire the staff button, because if it's held down, the door, it overrocks the door lock. But that was meant to like clue the player into this new mechanic, like, hey, Frob duration matters, which I don't think has been done in fan missions
Ever.
before.
I got
So with that, sorry,
I got that, but I couldn't, do it. I couldn't
so I
make it
think
work.
it was 400 milliseconds for the penthouse gate was the gap. So if it was less than that, it would be counted as a short. If it was longer than that, it would be counted as a long. I might be misremembering that. It was much longer for the staff only button. That one I think you had to hold down for 2 seconds. And so if you did, 2-second holds on the penthouse gate for the longs, that would work as well. But maybe you just weren't doing your longs long enough. It should be like dot 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 would probably get you through just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a binary threshold. It's over or under the threshold.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I
cool.
have to say I had the same experience that Alex did. Like I knew like what to do. Like I knew that it was the code, but for some reason like I was doing like dot dot dash dash dot dot and like I must not have been holding probably the dashes long enough, but eventually after like fiddling with the button it opened. I was like yay, but I was like I don't know if that's how it's supposed to go. But I
Yay!
did it.
Well, yeah. That's
Same for me.
well, but at least you got to feel smart because you did solve it. You knew what to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's the whole point of the puzzle, right? It's to figure out how to do it. I mean, the executing is just kind of usually the after, the lesser part. The bigger part is like finding out what to do with the information that you've uncovered.
I feel like
so that was something that was just a little bit tricky. So I played around during the beta testing process with where to set that threshold, where I thought it would be pretty player friendly and intuitive, but obviously maybe some refinement could still have been needed there.
I thought
it's the first time you did something like that, and maybe we've just been too stupid.
I thought it was a great
Let's
puzzle.
go with that.
When I read the note and it said like if you forget the code, remember dashes are long and dots are short. I was like, aha, it's Morse code. I get it. So like that was an instant tell for me.
Well, so it depends what difficulty you play on.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I just tipped my hand.
Well, yeah. So you played it on bachelors. So if you play it on bachelors, it'll say something like, remember, dashes are long. If you play it on masters, it'll say at the end, note the dots and dashes. And then if you play it on doctorate, it's just, I've encoded the sequence within your task list. And there's no, obviously if you look at the numbers, you'll maybe notice like it's weird that some of them have dots, some of them have dashes. There's no extra prompt
Maybe
to look for those or what they mean.
Maybe you should add an extra difficulty for people without a diploma.
Perhaps I should, but I don't think Thief accommodates a 4th difficulty level.
You made that portal work. I think you can weave in a 4th difficulty setting. And then you can say, yeah, it was simple. It was
really simple. You just add 1,000 Q-vars. And
I just reprogrammed the game from zero. No, it was just interest me, like where was the mistake I did. But I think you do some first timers a lot, I would say. Like just 3 missions released, and you already have like some really things you will remember for years. But
I ask about the future. Is that too soon?
Sure.
If that's okay. Well, so
I mean, I might not answer everything.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I don't want to be completely spoiled. I have more of maybe a design question. So, for the rest of the trilogy, are you do you have a game plan of maybe doing something similar to the hotel, and that you have this kind of area that you're sort of piecing through? Like you have a constant sort of environment, whereas like you're not just it's semi non-linear in a way because you're not say going down like a hallway or something. You're not going just like straight through. You have this environment that you keep going back through.
Yeah. So yes. So the next mission is going to be called Cantor's Paradise, and this is it picks up right after you've just opened the white gate at the end of the hotel, and so the next mission is I think going to be, in terms of that aspect of the gameplay, very similar to the first one, where now you're in Cantor's Paradise, which is going to be sort of tombey, but it's going to be this constant environment with sort of puzzles that are gradually you're getting access to more and more of the location around you. There's another location you can be at a little bit that I'm not going to say beyond that because I don't want to risk spoiling anything. And then the final mission will be at, I don't want to say where it is, but it'll be a little bit more standard Thief gameplay in some ways, I would say. And in terms of the locations available to you, I don't know if it's going to have sort of the same unpeeling process. There will be a little bit of that involved. But it'll be, I would say, a more conventional mission in terms of the environments and the enemies you're encountering than the first or certainly the second mission.
It's good to hear because I definitely that just design like always appealed to me, like the Metroid, Resident Evil sort of design of having this environment that is a character with and you just kind of slowly get keys and items that kind of let you piece your way through. And I want to say just also more generally with this mission, something else I liked is that you have a couple of threads that you can pull on at the beginning of the mission, which I think made it a little bit better for me. So like there is a couple different things you can do right away, like the staff area, and then there's like the basement, and you can see the generator. And that's something I really enjoyed because to me, I think what makes puzzles easier is if you have like 2 or 3 at a time presented to you. Sometimes in the process of doing one, you have that like aha eureka moment.
Yeah, the answer occurs to you for the others.
And then
Exactly.
so because like I've played other like puzzle missions and other puzzle games, and it's just like you solve one puzzle, then you're on to the next, then you're on to the next, and it's just like this 1, 2, 3 like linear sequence. And so, like, if you have trouble with the puzzle, it's oftentimes like, well, there's nothing you can do because you have one challenge in front of you. But something I enjoyed about this was that you had at least like 2 or 3 things you could possibly try at the same time. And it was like, okay, like if I can't do this one right now, I'm gonna do this one. And then there was times it's like, oh, like I just in the process I realized like I was exploring, for example, like in the mission for those who haven't played it, but there's a part where there is an alarm panel, and normally in Thief the alarm panel is like a big no. But I hadn't read the note about everything being completely rewired, or I hadn't really understood it. So I was like, there's an alarm here, and I'm like, well, there's not really any guards, so like I just like I chanced it and I pressed it, and obviously there's a key behind there when you press the alarm, which was really neat. And then I read the note about, it's in the last place a thief would look, and then it made sense to me. But that was just an example of something where like I was pulling on another thread, which was like kind of just exploring what I'd been given, and I found the other thread. So I thought that was really cool, and I think that's what kind of makes your mission really, really good, is that there's multiple threads that you can pull on at one time.
There's a key behind that alarm?
I also didn't solve that.
Really? Oh, spoilers.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so that's where the cash box key is. And so, like, if you look at the note to Benny, so Sir Riemann, who's the chief of staff, he's basically writing an angry note to Benny, who's the captain of the guard, who had this bright idea to hide the cash box key using the alarm button. And, single-handedly derailed the entire hotel operations. Like, that's why the alarm isn't working, is because of Benny's brilliant idea of where to hide the cash box key. And so there's this note that's like, if you have any more of your, bright ideas, be sure to run them by me first, because we've got to do a whole lot more here than hide just the cash box key. Even if it's the last place a thief would look, now the entire alarm system's down.
I read that because first of all, Benny is like the head of the guards at that point.
Yeah, that was not a good staffing decision by Sir Riemann, but
No, but how, in your head, how did he get into that position?
yeah, he might have lied on his resume. Who knows?
Yeah, but then they have to meet him in person. So.
I mean, yeah,
He talks a
which
big
was-
game.
No, I found that was really funny. I like that. Like, oh, Ben, everybody loves having Benny, and then he's like the boss of the guards, which was really cool. And I read that readable, but I didn't make the connection. It's actually pretty obvious. Like if the author mentions something like that to you, so there has to be something. But I think it's like no. The alarm buttons are no-go, so I think I didn't even try. So,
Oh, now you know how to get the cash box key.
Well, that
Do you
but I will never get back to that place because I won't find it anymore.
do you have to have the cash box key to open the cash box?
As far as I know,
Yeah,
maybe
no,
you can
it
get the
doesn't
rubble
open.
across some other way, but
No,
I
it
think
doesn't
I
open
lockpicked
lockpick.
it. Oh, so maybe I know I got that bonus objective on Bachelor.
It's
So
behind the sleeping guard, right? That's where
oh
the cash box
damn.
is. Yeah.
So maybe I found the key and I didn't know because I got that bonus objective.
One question: is it possible to grab the thing by accident, but just clicking somewhere, and maybe the throbbing mechanic grabs behind the wall or something?
that can happen. I
Because-
wouldn't expect that to happen here. So that wouldn't be an issue for things contained within a chest. It can be a problem for things behind a secret door. For example, in Sunken Temple of Dielya, the Talisman of Light, which is when you ignite the torchiere in the library,
Mhm.
the trapdoor comes open, and at one point, I just had the Talisman of Light sort of floating there waiting. But if you leaned up against the trapdoor and you just frobbed blindly through it, you would get the talisman. And I was like, well, that's not going to work. So what I did is I just had it teleport in when you lit the brazier. But for getting the cash box key, maybe it could happen. For using the cash box key on the cash box, there's no way that could happen by accident.
No, but because I think that I opened the cash box as well, so I think that I got the key. But of course
It's possible.
But maybe I even did the alarm thing. But I remembered
Actually,
some reflection on floors that wasn't there. So my
this
I
brings
mean, it
me.
could also be that I left a bug in that allows it to open in a way that I didn't intend.
you should get me as a beta tester because I will find out all the flaws. Like
Yeah,
the
Alex is
jumping
finding
over
everything.
jumping over the bridge with the rubble and.
All right, well, I'll be sure to drop you a line next time. I think the hotel missions
I'm pretty cheap.
scared off a number of potential beta testers, I think, because when I posted to get beta testers for the Dielya mission, I got a lot of people saying, like, I'm not testing for you. Your missions are too crazy.
And I would have loved to. I would have been like, wow, of course, Trefoilknot's mission, cool.
I mean, I can imagine it would be a bit daunting to test. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, I don't like testing big missions like Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel because I don't have the time for that, with all the podcasting and stuff, But small missions like Dielya, I'm always in for that.
all right, well, I'll keep you in mind.
So do they know the solution? Do the testers know the solution, or do you have them find? Because if I knew the solution and I was a beta tester, I'd be like, all right, now I want to see if I can achieve that objective without actually doing that solution, like how Alex took the rock across the bridge.
So no, they do not know the solution. So that's right. So that's what makes it tricky. Is so they don't know the solution because otherwise, how are you going to get feedback on whether
Right,
or
about
not
puzzle
a
difficulty.
player would have figured it out on their own?
Yep.
But so the problem with it is, so even if you're doing multiple rounds of testing, but you only have the same, 2, 3, 4 people, is maybe they didn't get the puzzle the first time around. Now you're like, okay, well, I have to fix it. But now when I present them with the fixed puzzle, just because they're able to now solve the fixed puzzle and it's more clear to them, it doesn't mean a new player would have. It's because, like, well, now this player has seen multiple versions of this. And so, you're not getting their fresh perspective on any subsequent versions of the puzzle that you present. So it's always difficult to really know at launch, like, hey, are people going to be able to figure out these puzzles, or are a bunch of people going to complain and have a bad time? So I'm always sort of, eagerly awaiting what I'm going to see in Let's Plays or what people are going to be posting on the forums, get a sense for, how people are doing with the puzzles. Of course, at that point, it's sort of too late. You can patch little things, but, if a puzzle is fundamentally not working. So I think the one puzzle I've done, which apparently, nobody ever gets, is the light puzzle at the end of Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb. Like, the two nested boxes. Nobody got those puzzles, as far as I can tell. So I think those were just, badly designed puzzles, sort of a live and learn type of situation as a designer.
Could you quickly explain how it worked? Because I didn't have a problem with any puzzle in that mission, I think.
It was not required to beat the mission, but if you wanted to get the codex, it was through the two gates. There were the three light panel things. So there were two nested boxes. There was a little box that had sort of a digital clock light display, and then there was another box around it that also had a fraction where the top and the bottom were each another digital light display. It was on the small box, it said how many of the lights are lit. And so if you type
I figured
one,
it out.
okay, so you're the one person then, or people who figure it out don't post on the forum about it.
Of course, because they figured it out.
But a ton of people posted I couldn't figure it out, or I got through the gates, just by random guessing, but I still have no idea what the heck was meant by that.
I'm sure that was my case as well, but I think it was actually pretty obvious. What confused me is that there was this reset button, because I was wondering what it's for.
It just turns off the lights.
Yeah, but I solved it. So for me, it was pretty obvious, if I remember it right. And now, it's Alex. He just wants to claim he's a genius. No, but I think that's the case. When people figure something out, if people are happy with the politics, they don't shout on Twitter, So you get the feeling that everybody is not satisfied because all the unsatisfied people shout on Twitter, but it's actually just a small group of people. So I can imagine
Steam reviews too.
Yeah, you're right.
Steam reviews, it's always people that either really, really hate it, or really people that are just it's good, or nah, it's okay. They don't usually bother leaving a review. People that are just kind of content.
It's the same with teacher evals. At the end of the semester, the only people that are leaving, they're taking the time to write comments, they either really loved you and the course, and that's going to be very few people, or they really hated it. Nobody who's just the course was fine, I liked it. They're not going to write anything. But
then you have Germany, where people are hey, the restaurant was really great, the food was good, but the measurements between the parking lots was not after the Dean rules, so I can only give it 1 star. That's actually a real review of a restaurant. I did. No. But it's always in the perception and how you want to acknowledge that. And people mostly acknowledge things when they're not satisfied, or, of course, in this they're stuck. Of course, they want to get further. But yeah, Jake just reminded me. Maybe we should throw in the community questions.
Oh, sure.
Because
we
are already on 2 hours 20, if I'm right, about. So, VFig, you mentioned him at the beginning, I think. He had a question on the forums, and you can read that whole thing up on in our thread. But the question is like, can some of you guys read it out with a
sure.
English? Yeah.
Do you want me to read his comment and his question, or his
No,
his
just like
question?
the question I would ask
Okay,
Trefoilknot.
sure, yeah. He says, the question I would ask, bringing real, albeit slightly fictionalized mathematical concepts and personalities and squabbles into the late medieval fantasy world of Thief is a surprising move. How did you end up there? Did you start with concepts as a base for puzzle design and then brought the mathematician into the story, or was it the other way around? I think you touched on this maybe a little bit, but before.
Yeah, a little bit, but I can give sort of a more direct answer to that question. So I started with... So the mathematicians came very early. Like, I knew that before I even opened up Dromed, I knew that this was going to be a mission about Hilbert and Cantor. I knew that they were going to be sort of the primary antagonists, and I knew that I was going to design the puzzles in many ways, and sort of everything about the mission was going to be sort of based on Hilbert's mathematics. So that's where I started with. Now, why did I get there in the first place? I think this one I'm going to attribute in large part to a YouTube channel that I really love called 3 Blue 1 Brown, which is, it's a fun sort of educational YouTube channel by this guy, Grant Sanderson, who does, it's all about math, a little physics thrown in, a little bit of computer science thrown in. He did a video in maybe 2014 called How Can Infinite Math Be Useful? And it was a math video all about the Hilbert curve. And the Hilbert curve, I'll give sort of a really quick description of it. It's a space-filling curve. So what that means is that there's a certain way that you can weave a line through two-dimensional space, even though the line is completely infinitesimally thin, zero thickness whatsoever. It will still completely fill the entire two-dimensional space. Or you could fill 3 dimensions or 4, however many dimensions you want. You could do it just by weaving this perfectly, infinitesimally thin line through it. This, this is something I had learned about in my math courses. This wasn't new to me. He presented it in this really interesting context, which was, suppose you wanted to write a program that would take pictures and convert them into audio files. Right? So like be able to just listen on your headphones to what a picture of a lion sounds like. Like not listening to a lion roar, but like, could you convert all of the information that you're seeing when you look at an image into a sound file without losing any information? And, so your initial reaction might be, well, the picture is 2-dimensional and the audio file is 1-dimensional. So it seems like you'd have to lose information mapping from one to the other. But what Hilbert shows is that, he's not obviously talking about audio files and pictures. But what his math shows is it gives a way to map between these two without losing any information. And I remember just thinking like, man, I wish they had taught this that way when I was learning about Hilbert curves in my real analysis course. Like, I was just learning it as, the limiting, behavior of some sequence. Now I understand this. Now I have intuition for it, and that's really cool. And I wanted to build a mission around this idea of, so I knew I wanted to have not paintings being represented as audio files, but sort of going up 1 dimension from that, having entire 3-dimensional areas being fully captured by the painting. And so I felt like, well, why don't I do a whole mission all about Hilbert? Because he has a lot of cool stuff. He's got the Hilbert curve thing, and, well, there's, the famous Hilbert's paradox of the Grand Hotel, which is a hotel with infinitely many floors that can accommodate, infinitely many guests. That'd be sort of a fun, zany location for a puzzle mission. So why don't I do it there? And then I thought, oh, it'd be cool if I'm doing it about Hilbert, I might as well throw Cantor into the mix and make him sort of like the corrupting influence. Like Cantor's the demon, and Hilbert is sort of the guy who falls under the demon's evil influence. Because this is a standard trope in a lot of my favorite thief missions from back in the day. Like, what is it? The Order of the Vine, I think, had this element. It's a very standard trope where there's sort of, evil is permeating and it's captured this one guy. So that was sort of where I started with the concept, was I wanted to take the mathematics of Hilbert's life, and then the next mission is going to be a lot about the mathematics of Cantor. Then just make everything sort of center around that in a way that people who know Hilbert's work, people who know Cantor's work, will see it and appreciate it. You don't have to know that stuff to play the mission, right? None of it is related to how you solve the puzzles. It's just sort of the philosophy underlying the puzzles. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I ended up there. It wasn't that I built this hotel and then I thought, oh, I'm gonna throw some mathematicians into the mix. It really came the other way around. I mean, really, all three of my missions have sort of a similar origin, where they all start with a mathematical concept or a mathematician or a couple mathematicians, and then I build a mission around that. So Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb was all about Bertrand Russell. Is a mathematician famous for his self-referential paradoxes, popularized by things like, this statement is a lie. Well, is that true or false? So I wanted to make a whole mission that was sort of about self-referentiality. So it has like, the self-referential floors, the pillars, which are represented, referentially as the levers, things like that. And then Sunken Temple of Dielya was all about the non-Euclidean geometry that was discovered by Ivanovich Lobachevsky, who was a Russian mathematician, which then later influenced Albert Einstein's work on gravitation and relativity, and is what led to the theory of wormholes, which is, what that temple is all about. And so that's why, if you notice in the trash can, there's Newton's Principia, which was, sort of the state of the art about how gravity worked before Albert Einstein and Lobachevsky introduced, curvature into the equation. And so that's why it's in the garbage, because, Lobachevsky presented this idea of, sort of hyperbolic geometries, which then Einstein took and said, oh, well, then we can have wormholes and we can have curved space-time. So that's sort of always where my missions begin. I always find inspiration from the math, which I then decide how I want to fold into a mission.
Wow. Yeah. So I think that the question from Vivek was answered. I really like that, the way you answer is like you already answer so many questions we don't need to ask anymore then. This is really cool, like that you really go into all of this detail. So and what I like that is when you're thinking, you do that finger snipping. Snapping. Yeah. So I just need to sink that in. And so Matt99, he got in touch with me. He's also from the community. And he had 5 questions, but 2 of those you already answered before during other topics. But he has a basic question that is, what do you think makes for a good puzzle? What is your goal when making a puzzle or puzzle FM? I think you basically already answered that, but may I just may I make a conclusion like what you said before? Like I had the impression that you want to have balanced puzzles that are solvable for everybody, or at least most of the people. But yeah, what do you think makes a good puzzle, like in general?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for this, I think I like to, in my mind, think about two different types of puzzles. I think something is a puzzle if the primary challenge is a mental one of figuring it out, right? So not about skillful execution or anything like that. But then within that category of puzzles, I think of there being two. This is my terminology, so maybe other people talk about it differently. But the way I think about it is you've got riddles, which require riddle solving, right? The puzzle is about deciphering meaning, making connections, and figuring out what am I supposed to do. So, for example, in Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb, it's the projection room. You've got the poem about journey to stand on a point of self-reference, curry my favor with the demonstration of deference. Right? You're trying to figure out what is meant by this, making the connection to that room, recognizing the point of self-reference on the floor, and then crouching in order to give the demonstration of deference. The cue blocks in Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel, you have the poem about taking a book from the library, and maybe the infinity pool, maybe the rooftop pool. These are riddles. You're trying to figure out meaning, which is different from problems, which require problem solving, where the puzzle is about understanding mechanics and how they interact with one another. And the puzzle isn't what am I supposed to do, but how am I supposed to do it? So for example, in the hotel, right, getting the olive stone out of the room. Right? There's no riddle. There's the olive stone. I'm supposed to steal it. I got to get it out of the room. How exactly you're supposed to do it requires you to have sort of a deep understanding of game mechanics, right? Like, how do the paintings work? How does the gate relate to the olive stone? Oh, when I pick it up, the gate closes, but if I'm in the painting, I can get the olive stone out by taking the glasses off. So in terms of what makes a puzzle good, I think that's very different depending on whether you're talking about a riddle or if you're talking about a problem. Before I talk about that more, does the distinction I'm making between riddles and problems, does it make sense?
Makes sense to me.
I actually find it interesting because in Germany we have a distinction between riddles and puzzles, but what we call puzzles and riddles, you all call puzzles on English. So what I get is a riddle on English is just like the Riddler does, like in a poem or some he gives you some hints and you need to figure out what he's doing. He wants you to get to the solution during that. And a puzzle is like everything else, like no matter if it's like a combination you have to find out or everything else. And in German, a riddle can be anything that takes your brain, and a puzzle is just the puzzle with the pieces like on cardboard, where you put together the picture. And that's interesting, like how those words are pretty close to each other, but on different languages mean something different. So but it's clear what you mean as a riddle and as a puzzle, for me at least.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll stick with my terminology.
Of course, it's English.
So I think, for a problem, so not riddles and sort of figuring out clues, but more like it's pretty clear what I'm trying to accomplish. And there are some game mechanics that I need to figure out a way to exploit to accomplish it. I think the ideal problem, like the sequence that I want going on in the player's head is I want it to start off with a thought like, oh, this doesn't seem too bad. And then you try it a little bit and you go, oh, okay, no, I see this is a little tricky. And then a little bit after that, you say, I don't think this can be done. This seems impossible. And then you have an insight. And then you say, oh, like there's this one trick, one thing that I wasn't appreciating at the start, which now I see. That makes it easy now to solve, and then it ends with the player thinking, I'm so smart, that was so cool. So I think that's sort of the ideal sequence. You want it to be simple enough. Like the worst thing a problem can be at the start is daunting. Those aren't interesting to solve. If they're daunting, you never have that moment of wonder where you're like, it seems so simple, but I can't figure out how to do it. It seems impossible, right? If it's daunting and complicated, maybe you never solve it, but you're never sort of, wondering in amazement at how it could be done. You sort of feel like, well, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but there's just so much going on right now. My brain can't sort through it all. This isn't fun. So what you want is it to be as simple as it can possibly be, with this one insight that the player needs to have. And that's actually, we haven't talked about this, but that's actually the inspiration for my handle, Trefoilknot. The trefoil knot, so a knot in mathematics, if you just think about having like a piece of string that has like maybe a little latching mechanism at either end so you can sort of close it into a loop, that's a knot. And the simplest thing you could do is make it into a circle, sort of a trivial knot, not really knotted up at all. And the trefoil knot is the simplest non-trivial knot. So what's the simplest thing you could do with this piece of string that would turn it into a knot that you wouldn't be able to just convert back into a circle without unclasping the latch? And so the trefoil knot is sort of a metaphor for what I think makes a good puzzle, which is the simplest possible non-trivial thing. So you take an idea, you say like, what's the insight I want to force the player to have to solve this? Now let me build the simplest possible thing around that. It's not trivial because it requires this insight. I want to simplify every other aspect and sort of distill it into this one single insight that I want the player to have. I think that's what makes a really good problem.
And it also, has the balance thing. Just one little interesting thing that I just translated Trefoilknot to German, and it's shamrock.
Yeah. Well, so that's why I'm clover loop for Dielya. Because a trefoil is a clover, and a knot is just a loop.
Interesting.
Okay, this episode will, make the IQ of the players like raise them, like all of the listeners. I'm sorry that I interrupted you there, but
that's no problem. I tend to meander, so I understand that.
No, but what I'm really impressed is like, and that how much thought from so many perspectives you put into, I would say in finger quotes, simple things, but I knew from playing the game and having like the little pre-discussion we had some weeks ago, that there is so much brain put into your things, or and I think it's best to link your math behind the Hilbert's hotel, because there you explained so much already. But from so many perspectives, you think things through, and and then they work out, and I'm so impressed in how much thought you put into everything. And I thought in my normal life that I put too much thought into everything, but you put way more thoughts into things, but it doesn't seem it's like too much. It's like the Trefoilknot you just explained. Whoa. I don't know. What do you guys have?
I agree. Anything? It's like you approach this like almost like from a professional, like you're making a professional like paid for mission, like like combining all these like things. Like you think about the art, you think about the story, you think about like all these different elements, like the gameplay. Like that's like what a professional I think would do. So like I think you're approaching this in a good way, like from like almost a professional standpoint.
Normally you have a studio for this with different people for the different tasks, and you are just combining all of this into one person.
You'd have like the art guy, you'd have like the music guy, you'd have like the guy who would be like explain all the lore and all the math stuff, but you're kind of having to do all that at once.
Where you just mentioned the music, that is, before I forget that, where you have so many so much great music in the Hilbert's Highrise Hotel. Where is it from? Because I know that music. I guess it's from movies, right? Like because they
Some of it is from movies. So let's see. So when you first start the mission, and you're sort of in that foggy entrance area, and there's this sort of like creepy atmospheric background music going on. That is from Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. It's the very opening of the second act.
Is
of
it
the
the one that
ballet.
sounds a bit like Christmas? Creepy Christmas, like Home Alone?
No. So
That was later, right?
maybe
That was in the upper floor.
So that I think is the penthouse.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that one is actually Ben Phoenix got mad at me because it's from a Disney movie, and Disney's like psycho about using stuff.
Yeah, I can I can imagine.
Yeah, so that is from the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast. I thought it was like the perfect vibe of like it sort of had this magic and mystery in it that was inviting but creepy at the same time.
But yeah, of course, now that you say it, now I like the original movie is my favorite Disney movie, Beauty and the Beast. But
It's a good movie.
The original, yeah, not the auto-tuned Emma Stone. No, not Emma Stone. What was
Emma Watson.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Emma
Emma
Watson.
Watson.
Every nerd's
That
wet
was
dream.
not as good.
Yeah, auto-tuned Belle. Yeah. But you know that's all you have a choice of music, you have a choice of art, and then of course that's just some little pieces, and then there's all this technical stuff and mathematical and whatnot. Yeah. So Matt99 had another question, and I would like to simplify that a bit, because he was asking, what puzzle are you most pleased, proud of, and which ones are you least satisfied with? But I would put it into like, please tell us your favorite puzzle you did and the least favorite, if you can tell us.
Yeah. So most pleased with and proud of versus favorite, those are different, I guess. But like the one, I have a real soft spot for the projection room, so that the perspective puzzle in Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb. I don't think it's my best puzzle by any stretch, but that was the one. I had never released a fan mission before. I'd been playing fan missions for, since I was 10 years old. And, fan mission authors, like my favorite ones especially, were sort of like celebrities to me. And I looked at the missions they did, and I thought, like, well, I can never do that. So why would I ever, release a mission for anybody? And then that was the puzzle that I came up with, where I said, you know what? This is good. I could feel proud releasing a mission with this. And so that was sort of the moment where I said, like, no, I'm never going to make Broken Triad the way a Shakhtar can. I'm never going to make the Seven Sisters the way Lady Rowena can. But I can make this puzzle, and it'll be good, and players will like it. And so that was, I think, the one that gave me the confidence to actually make a mission fully complete and release it. So in that sense, I think it's the one I'm most proud of. Now, I think there are a lot of better puzzles. Like, I think how you get the Olive Stone out of the Olive Stone chamber, like, I think that's a better puzzle in many ways. But it was the projection room that I think in my heart is sort of like, that was the one that started it all. Least favorite puzzle? We talked about the lights puzzle. That one I feel like was sort of out of place. At the very end of Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb, there was, the nested boxes lights puzzle. I was very pleased with the puzzle itself, but it sort of felt out of place in the rest of the mission. And it broke my cardinal rule, which is your missions can be about math, but you should never make the player do math. And so in that sense, I think that's the puzzle that I look back on with sort of like the most cringe. Like, oh, that was just sort of like a silly thing that I threw in there. Yeah, maybe some players had fun with it. I liked the Bertrand's Codex thing with all the sort of like silly self-referential things. Like the sentence which perfectly describes how many of each letter it has. But I didn't. In retrospect, I think it was maybe a mistake to include that lights puzzle because it just felt sort of incongruous with the rest of what was going on in that mission. A little bit superfluous, and a lot of players didn't understand it.
Do you keep all the information for your missions in a design document?
I mean, yes, I do. It's not like a super structured one like you might see at a AAA studio where there's, like a detailed flow chart that sort of, lays everything out nicely. But I do have, Word docs that have sort of all of my puzzle ideas, which ones I'm including, which ones I'm cutting, what the sequence of events I'm looking to transpire is. Some crude sketches of what the locations might be and how they interrelate to each other, but nothing detailed. Like for the most part, it's something I sort of glance at for reference while I'm drometting.
It's high level.
So admitted, my the idea I had with you lecturing before a chalkboard wasn't so far away from the truth.
In the sense that I'll say, "Oh, this is really simple," and then I'll put something incredibly convoluted on the board.
Yeah.
That
I just have that simple 512 pages document. No,
I rarely get accused of being too accessible as a lecturer. I'll admit that.
Too accessible?
Too easily understood. I like to sort of dig into the deep stuff. I get excited about what I'm talking about, and so I'll sort of go down rabbit holes, which a couple students appreciate. Most students have no idea what's going on, perhaps.
I think, because I in some way I can imagine how how it is to be one of your students. But I actually think that when you want to simplify or explain things for everybody to understand, sometimes you cannot go with a simple answer. Sometimes you have to stay on that your flat area, so you don't get into too complicated stuff, so everybody can follow. But then sometimes it takes more wording to explain it. So I'm with you. I can, because even I understood things, and I have the language barriers as well, and yeah, I think then it's more of like interest or something when people have a problem with that, I would say. But where I was just with your students, the last question from Matt99 was, do your students know that you are an FM creator, and are you trying to get them interested in the Thief game here and there during the mathematic lessons? I think we know the answer, but please go on.
So to my knowledge, my students are not aware that I'm a fan mission creator. It's not something I bring up. I mean, maybe I have some Taffers in the room and they just don't say anything to me. I feel like if I was a student of mine and I knew, oh, that professor made some fan missions, I feel like I would say something just because that seems like a cool way to be able to connect. But that's never happened. So I would imagine that none of them play Thief, or if they have, they played 2014. And have no idea that I'm a fan mission creator. Am I trying to get them interested in Thief games? No, it's not. It's not something that... I mean, I would say that I'm trying to get them interested in problem solving. And so to the extent that my missions are all about problem solving, I mean, I would say that there is a connection there. And I think my approach to how I design a good puzzle is actually pretty similar to my approach to how to write a good exam question, which is you want to have... Each problem should have a focus. What is the insight that this, in that case, that the student needs to demonstrate that they understand in order to solve that problem? Obviously a slightly different context than fan mission design. There is some connection there, I think, between puzzle creation and teaching and exam creation. But no, it's not. It's certainly nothing that I'm sort of overtly trying to connect in my class.
See, so you have to find ways to incorporate it into your lessons. You have to be like, this is just like that Thief game from 20 years ago. You know, they'd be like, what is he talking about?
I just wanted to say, I think that you, Matt, would be able to make the connection and make it make sense.
I mean,
But-
what I notice is, like, I don't think of myself as old, you know, because I'm 32.
Yeah.
My students are mostly 19 to 22, and so even if I make, like, a Seinfeld reference, I get, like, a couple knowing smiles and then mostly blank stares. And it's like, they don't even know Seinfeld, which is from the same time as Thief, but was, like, the most popular thing in the world at the time that Thief came out.
I totally agree, because when I was I don't know what do you call it. When I was learning my job, you know, at school, I was already 23, and I had people in my class that were 17, 18, and they even didn't get some references from like 7-8 years ago, and so, you know, I think, especially in nowadays media, you know, where things are shifting so much, that's why I would actually say, you know, we were talking, you know, normally you talk about generations, like from, you know, a huge time span, you know, like 20 years in between or something like that. But I would say nowadays, with all the media and the influence the media has on us today, that generations are actually defined somehow in like 5 years sometimes, you know, because like the cycle, how things, I just say the fidget spinner, you know, how much it was, like half a year, you know, there was a huge hype. But nowadays, you know, people that are 2 or 3 years younger than the children that you know, grew up with that for half a year, they don't even know what it is, you know, anymore. And I think that's the thing, you know, they are totally into other things, and they don't know those little things, you know. And I think Thief is such a niche product. Meh.
Well, even like Thief, even Thief 2014, like that was only like 7 years ago, but that game, like, in some ways, like, feels old. You know, that game's like old now too. Like, I don't mean to.
Even I don't know what you're talking about, you know.
So, you know what I mean? Just like, I know what you mean though. Like with things like with the internet, it does feel like things like move like quicker. So it's like harder to get, because like people are like, oh, like those graphics are not like 4K. You know what I mean? Like even like 1080p. Like now I've seen some people in some corners of the internet being like, oh, 1080p. You know, like not gonna do that.
Yeah,
So
and what I would say, like, Jake, how you are, like, what, 26?
yeah, I'm 26.
Yeah,
Yep.
so you are not like Matt and me. We are the generation that, you know the times without internet, and we were the you know, the early adopters of times with internet, you know. And you know,
I was 18 when I got a cell phone. You know, like.
Well, I'm a little bit of an outlier, because we weren't too well off when I was growing up, so I had sporadic internet use until I didn't really get on the internet till I was like a teenager, really. So I was like 13-ish. But it was, yeah, like computers have always like been in my life. Like I don't not remember like seeing computers.
But in general, like 26-year-olds nowadays, you know, when I got internet, I was 10 or 11. You know, so they were like 5 or 6. So when they actively, you know, recognized the internet, it was already there in most households. So, you know, that's just a little time span where things change. And then it's like, I know times without iPhone, but others grew up like when the smartphones were just a thing, you know, and so on. So yeah, but that's another discussion. I think one thing I want to mention are the Easter eggs I recognized. First of all, because that was pretty close to the episode with Stephen Russell. You had the Stephen Russell painting in there, which I really appreciated. And the Rowan Atkinson one that I really liked. I know it's a famous meme, but you know, it's like, you know, the what do you call it? The collection of the pictures there. You know, of course,
gallery.
No, but when there's in the museum, there's now the new, you know what,
Exhibit.
and it's pretty serious. And of course, Stephen Russell, the picture could be but just a serious painting of someone. But like the Rowan Atkinson one, I really liked because it doesn't stand out at first, and then you look like, what? Wait, what was that? And then you go back and then, wait. But are there other that I missed?
I mean, I guess when you say Easter egg, it's hard to know. Like, there's a ton of mathematical Easter eggs. And then in terms of Thief Universe Easter eggs, there's the whole thing going on with the Rothschilds, and he writes in his letter to the general counsel, do you have any idea how incredibly important I am? There was a lot of sort of like excerpting things from the original Thief games. I don't know if you call that an Easter egg. I mean, there's certainly inserting humor into my missions is something that I love to do. Some things that anybody will get, some things that only a Thief player would get, some things that only people who know something from outside the game, something about the math or the science, might get. Yeah, I mean, I love. I don't like to take it so seriously when I make these missions. Even something, like the hotel mission, I think is in many ways sort of dark. And it has sort of a serious vibe, but I like to sort of punctuate it with, a little bit of silliness here or there. Like the joke book thing in the accountant's office.
I thought that was funny. I found that one.
Yeah, and even that Benny is, like...
the Benny thing.
There's a lot of humor, I agree.
I don't know if you guys caught the Xylon Bane troll in the book about the artifacts.
No, I missed that. Do tell.
So, do you know who Xylon Bane is? I don't know if
I do. I know exactly who Xylon Bane is.
So I had this book that was, I think it's in Brower's office. It's on the table by the painting, maybe? Or maybe it's on his desk. I can't remember. But it's this book that goes through all of these various different artifacts that are, from this universe. So one of them is the Olive Stone. So it tells you all about the Olive Stone and how it needs to be observed under dark lights, because otherwise you'll go crazy looking at it. And then there was something about, there's this, staff that gives you the ability to understand other people's perspectives. And then one of them was the Pendant of the Pedant, which is this, cheap locket that was, it gives the wearer the ability to detect logical errors in other people's statements, even if there were no such errors there. It was, the catch, though, is that once you're wearing it, all you can do is try to point these things out to be funny. And it was originally designed as a locket meant to banish Xylons. And, nobody knows what's happened to it or something like that. But
Got you. I understand now. I missed that reference when I read that book, but I'm glad that you explained it.
Yeah.
Now I'm in on it.
Now you're in on it, yeah.
But
I do like doing those sort of fourth wall breaking little things. I have an idea for an entire mission. You guys sort of joked about this in your podcast about like the fourth wall mission. But I actually do have an idea for a Thief fan mission where it's a puzzle mission, but the whole concept is that the player needs to understand the relation between themselves and Garrett, the character.
oh my god! But I think that will be interesting. I'm looking
I'm
forward
sold.
to that. But sorry, but my initial question was on the paintings. So I recognized Stephen Russell and Rowan Atkinson, but are there other paintings in that gallery that reference some?
In that gallery? No, I don't think there are any other Easter egg paintings in the gallery. I mean, there's obviously the paintings throughout the mission, which actually I don't even think we talked about, but they play a pretty big role. But no other Easter egg paintings.
Okay. But to be honest, the paintings in the mission in general. What do you mean?
He means the teleporting paintings.
Yeah, the spectacle of extra-dimensional experience.
Yeah, Um. So that was actually a thing. Yeah, I said that before. Like I had to ask Psychosis, like, how did you get the Elf Stone? Because when you take it, then you cannot get out of the room because it's locked. So you have to work. You have to find another solution. Yeah, I think the paintings. First of all, of course, I thought about Super Mario 64. That was my initial thought, and I think it's a a well-known theme jumping into a painting, and I really like that. Like the you had to do some we said thinking around the corner. Um, so yeah, but guys, what do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that would. That's so funny that you made the Super Mario 64 connection because that's like one of the first things I think of too. Anytime you have to like jump in and out of a painting, but I didn't connect that when I first played the mission. So using paintings as a portal to another world or another place to get to.
Yeah, so I mean, it was certainly not inspired by Super Mario 64, but yeah, I absolutely see. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a standard trope, sort
Yeah,
of
that makes
jumping in and out of the
sense.
paintings.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
yeah, I mean, it was one of the first things I knew building this mission that I wanted to do. Like, you asked, I think it was VFig's question, and so I already partially answered that. But yeah, the paintings that you jump in and out of and the spectacles of extra dimensional experience, even by name, like I knew that I was going to put those in this mission even before I broke ground in Dromad.
So is there any, this is maybe a little bit off in the weeds, but is there any other games that you're looking towards for inspiration, maybe for future missions that you don't have planned yet, maybe not a part of the trilogy? Like any other games that you're, or games maybe for the trilogy that you're
Yeah.
looking at for inspiration, because, of Oblivion and things like that.
So one game I've gotten into lately, and you mentioned, or maybe it was somebody else who mentioned, something about sort of being able to pull at different threads and having,
Yeah.
different
Yep.
puzzles you can work on at the same time.
Yep,
So
yeah, I talked about that earlier.
Yeah, that to me was very inspired by this game, Talos Principle. I loved Portal. Portal was one of my all-time favorites, but one of my biggest gripes with it was how linear it was. And if you got stuck on a puzzle, I mean, Portal wasn't all that difficult, so getting stuck tended not to be a problem. If you did get stuck, there was sort of, just nothing doing. Like, you can't go back, you can't go some other place, you're just stuck until you figure it out. Whereas Talos Principle, it was sort of similar in that it was, sort of a philosophical first-person puzzler.
From Germany, I guess.
It was much more branching. So you didn't have to solve every puzzle, and you didn't have to do them in a specified order. And so if you were stuck on one, well, you could go to another one, and then maybe you'd have an insight later, and you could go back to that puzzle. I think Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel had a bit of that, but it could have had more, because there were still certain progressions that just needed to happen in that specified order. So I think going more that route is something I want to experiment with at the least. And then another puzzle mission I've started playing lately, very different from Thief, but it's called Baba Is You. I don't know if you've ever played this.
That sounds familiar.
I know
Really interesting puzzle concept. So it has this super old school vibe. Like technically, it looks like a game you could have played in 1994. It's these sort of flat plane 2-dimensional games with 8-bit textures and all that. But it has this really interesting meta mechanic, which is you can push around bits of code, like really simple bits of code. And when I say simple, I don't mean in the Matt way of simple, but like truly simple, like, just the word Baba, the word is, the word you. And, if you put them in a string, Baba is you, then you get to control the Baba character. And if you make it spell rock is you, well, then you get to control the rock character. And so the whole thing is sort of manipulating the code that is presented within the map that you're looking at. So you're sort of changing the rules of the game as you play through it in order to solve the game. Which, I mean, it's brilliantly done. Some of the puzzles, I think, sort of perfectly follow, what I laid out as sort of the ideal problem, where you start out and it seems easy, then you start trying a mission and you're like, oh man, this is actually pretty tricky. I don't think this can be done. Then you sort of have that insight moment, and then you're like, oh my god, this is the most clever puzzle I've ever seen.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to incorporate any part of some of those concepts into like a Thief fan mission. I think it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I have some ideas on how I might do it. But it would be out there. So I don't know what can be done. And more importantly, it's like straddling the boundary of interesting versus cringy. When you sort of do these out there ideas, it can be a little bit difficult to manage. Because I think some people, if it's a little bit fourth wall breaking, like they just find it corny and cheesy. And so if you were to develop a mission sort of centered around that idea, I don't know how people would take to it. But I find this Baba Is You game I found so intriguing. And so I'm like dying to see if I can do something with this idea.
I think Thief is one of those communities that would be receptive, like corny humor is par for the course in most missions. There's at least one corny humor note.
Maybe what you mean too, maybe more, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but is exploring outside maybe the traditional boundary. Because I mean, Hilbert's Hotel, while it's not anything quite like a mission that's in, an original mission, the setup is very Thief-esque, like you're going to rob this hotel, you know what I mean? And at nighttime, like that's very, like from a story standpoint, I mean, obviously it gets very much different from there, but that setup is very traditional. So I think maybe what you mean too is exploring some of those concepts maybe in a way that's not traditional, maybe might kind of poke some people the wrong way maybe, but correct me if I'm off base there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I think I would still try to keep it, it's Garrett pulling off a heist type thing. Not sure. I mean, I already think that the missions that I've released stray pretty far from the traditional mold. I mean, you're right, they're classic Thief fare in the sense that you are playing as Garrett and, they're heists. Maybe you're robbing from a tomb, maybe you're robbing from a hotel, but it's, very much it starts out as you're there to pull off a heist, go, steal the MacGuffin and get out, and then maybe things go haywire from there. But I think people don't find my missions to be typical, and I think I agree with them because even if the premise is fairly standard Thief, the gameplay is not. Like in terms of what provides the challenge. If you evaluate the quality of my missions from the standpoint of like how thoughtfully done are the AI patrol routes and how difficult does it make stealth gameplay, I think, my missions are certainly not standing out in a good way on those fronts. So players who what they really want is sort of a fun stealth heist experience, which is I think a lot of Thief players, which makes sense. My missions don't really give that to them, and I wouldn't even say they're really designed with that in mind. A lot of that sort of comes as an afterthought. What I really, the experience I want the player to have is sort of unpeeling the map, as you put it earlier, sort of getting to explore more and more of this location you're in through solving puzzles and sort of gradually seeing, hopefully, an interesting story unfold before you. I think Ashaktar does this really well, but I think he also was really great with the thiefy stealth gameplay. So I think that's why he's a favorite among many, myself included, because he was able to do both of those things really, really well. Because I think in my missions, I sacrifice a lot of that conventional Thief gameplay in order to get the other things that I want. So,
Interesting. So basically, possibly, if people want a spoiler tease for what you're working on next, maybe check out Baba's You and Talos Principle.
yeah, I mean, it's certainly. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I would be the only one who saw the connections coming in, but they're certainly going to be inspiring, at least in some ways, for the missions that I have coming next. If they liked what I did with Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel, I'm confident they're going to like the next couple, because I think the concepts are trying to stay true to form there, but my dromeding skill has certainly gotten a lot better now than it was when I was first making the hotel mission.
Yeah. um. So I think we are at about 3 hours now. So I think we should slowly come to an end. But guys, is there a thing you definitely want to cover? Or is there something you, Matt, want to cover or explain where you feel that was not mentioned, but you want to talk about it?
I mean, I think we've discussed a lot of the big. I mean, we didn't really get into the weeds on any of the puzzles or any of the math. I think that's probably fine. I don't know that that's really what listeners to the podcast are going to want.
I think we can exclude the math because I will link the thread to the math of the hotel, because I think you already did it on text, and I think we tried to cover other things. That's why I think I will just link that, and because you already did a great explanation on that. But what else do you think we should talk about?
If there were any sort of puzzles or any of the references or anything like that you're just curious about, I'd be happy to sort of weigh in. Otherwise, I think we've done a pretty good job hitting the big picture stuff about my missions and my philosophy when it comes to making a puzzle or a puzzle mission.
I think thinking of the complexity of your work in general, but of course, Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel. I think that we, of course, we didn't dive really, 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 really deep into that, but I think that we, picked different things, different topics, and covered them. And I think, there, of course, is so much to talk about. There are so many details. We didn't go really into the story. I could talk about that, just one little thing, like, guys, turn off the fog, and when you are at a place where you have a clear view at the sky, just do that. There's so much, but I think for now we're good. And I'm really grateful for your detailed explanations. I have to admit, for the questioning part, it was the easiest episode so far with the guests.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I'm leaving smarter than I came.
Yeah.
That's always the goal.
Yeah, sometimes I play fan missions and I'm like, I kind of want to learn how to do this, but then I see like these explanations that you've given in your kind of philosophy, and I'm like, whoa, this is like, I don't know. You know what I mean? When you see somebody do something really well, you're like, do I want to do this? Like, but
one, I mean, I'm glad that you like what I've done. But I think, if you look at where I started with Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb, like that, there was strong ideas, but very rough around the edges in a lot of the sort of technical execution. And then the gap between that and Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel was a couple of years.
Yeah, and the gap is huge.
So, I always want to encourage people to, learn Dromed and make more fan missions, because we're all richer for it when new clever people do that. And I think, I had been dromeding quite a lot before Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb, but like never with the intent to ever actually show anybody. It was more just like sort of futzing around, and so I never really bothered to get very good at making the environments look beautiful or learning how to do custom objects or anything. So it really was with just that short gap between Bertrand's Forgotten Tomb and Heist at Hilbert's Highrise Hotel that I decided I wanted to dig into it more. And so I think, it's got a steep learning curve, but anybody can learn it, and anybody can learn to be pretty darn good at it, is what I would say. So
I
Great.
please do. I'd love to play a mission of yours sometime.
we are just good for having ideas for contests. So it's up to people like you to fill those contests with great ideas if they will ever happen. But I think it's a great thing, like, to try to get people into this. And it's still amazing that there are still people like coming up. You would think like over 20-year-old game, like the community would die at a certain point, but there are still even young people coming up like, hey, I'm new to this, and it's amazing. And we try to do our our what do you say, like our part on the internet with celebrating Thief. And it sometimes works. And so basic questions, Seth, Jake, anything you guys want to cover?
No, just wanted to say that I thought the mission was really good. Definitely would put it within like my, favorite or top fan missions. Just because everything else that we discussed. So, I really like the mission, and I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you so much. That's high praise. I appreciate it.
I would echo Jake's sentiments as well, but I'd have one mathematical question for you.
All right. I love it.
0 or 1?
0 or 1?
That's
Man,
great.
this feels like a trick question.
No tricks.
Just out of your stomach.
Like which is my favorite number? I like 1, I would say.
You can do more with a 1 than with a 0, I would guess. But I could imagine that you could prove me wrong.
You can take 0 factorial, and then you're at 1, and then you can do whatever you want with that.
I would wonder if there's that is the thing. If there is one question that you could just answer with one word. And I think the answer is no. I really appreciate that you are the guest here. That was an amazing experience. I'm so blown away. I got an idea of what we will get at our pre-talk, but wow, I'm really happy and satisfied right now. But
Good. Well, I'm glad my students don't always love my sort of meandering approach, but I'm glad that you did.
yeah, I think they didn't play your missions, so
It's
they
true, so their
don't.
opinions don't count.
They just see that theoretical stuff, and maybe sometimes it's overwhelming. But when you see that it can form into art to this degree, then maybe they would have a different opinion. But so I think that we can end this round. It was a great experience. I hope that you Taffers listening will also appreciate it. We tried our best to squeeze all the stuff into 3 hours. We know that there will be a lot of stuff to talk about, but hey. So Matt, is there anything you want to say at the end? You want, to give people.
I mean, I would say thank you for having me on. This was a pleasure and a privilege to have this opportunity to talk about my work. I'm honored that you consider me somebody worth having on the show. I hope that the listeners got something of value out of hearing me rattle on about, my thoughts on these things. I think the caveat I would give is, I have my ideas about how I want things to be. It doesn't mean that my missions always live up to that, or that things have to live up to that to be worthwhile. But yeah, this was a lot of fun to be on the show, and I look forward to listening to your podcasts in the future.
Thank you very, very much. What I can say, because Jake and Seth said how they liked the mission, so far, when a mission is on, it's a mission I really like. But of course, if you Taffers out there have a mission where you think you really need to talk about that, and you know that the author is still around, or you know how to contact the author, then let us know. Matt, thanks for your time, and I hope that your wife and your daughter did also have a good time during these 3 hours. I appreciate it, and I would say thank you, and Taffers, thanks for listening. Bye. Seth, Jake, you want to say something?
Thanks for tuning in.
Yep.
Okay. At the same time. So, Matt, thank you so much. That was so amazing.
My pleasure. Cheers, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
And cut. Wow.
Very nice.
What a ride.
That was fun, guys. Same time next week? No.
Well, I'd like to stay for the finale, but I've got a feeling it's time to move on.